Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this Muslim Skeptic Live, we can call it. Very impromptu, on short notice, but we have something very important to talk about today. This is something that you may have been following me on the Telegram channel, or you may have been following on Twitter. But it's a very important topic regarding the Dawah Mafia and some of these figures who continue to distort, mislead, even trick or dupe the Muslim community into thinking that they're something that they're not, and that Islam is something that it's not. So this is going to be a very important topic, inshallah. I've even invited the people that I'm going to be criticizing. I've criticized them on many occasions, as you may have noticed. Omar Suleiman, Yasser Qadi, Jonathan Brown. They're welcome to join this live stream. And I invited them earlier. And let it not be said that I'm not willing to engage with the people that I criticize. I'm more than willing. They just don't want to talk to me. I wonder why. So let's see if they'll show up. Maybe if you know them, you can tag them, or you're following them on social media, you can tag them and see if they will come. Before we get into the meat of it, let me take care of some housekeeping. So make sure to like this video and subscribe. Also, make sure to go to muslimskeptic.com and sign up for our newsletter. We are going to start up a newsletter very soon and are going to be including, inshallah, important information that you can only get through that newsletter. It's very important for you to sign up to the newsletter. Why? Because this is the, if la qadar Allah, something happens, we get banned from YouTube or we get banned from other social media channels, we need a way to contact you. We need a way to tell you about what we're doing. So you can always go to muslimskeptic.com, but it just makes it a lot easier if you provide us a good email address where we can be in touch. We promise not to sell your information or to misuse or spam your email, inshallah. So please do that right now. Go to muslimskeptic.com and sign in or create that. You just have to enter your email to sign up to the newsletter, inshallah. So what are we talking about today? Yesterday, I got a barrage of messages on Telegram, on WhatsApp, what have you, saying, Daniel, what do you think about this statement that was just released? I was like, what statement was just released? And then I look at it, and it's called Navigating Differences. And Yasser Qadi has shared it on his Facebook and Twitter. Omar Suleiman has shared it on his Facebook. All of the usual suspects, let's say, are sharing this document. And it is a document that purports to clarify issues of Islamic sexual ethics and identity, gender identity. So let me put it on the screen so you can see. All right. Clarifying sexual and gender ethics in Islam. So they are calling for people to sign this, specifically imams, scholars, du'at. They're begging people, sign this, please. We've worked weeks. We've worked weeks on this statement, and it is really something so profound and impactful. And this is really clarifying the issues related to sexual ethics and gender. So there are a lot of imams who are wondering, should we sign this? Some of them asked me, Daniel, what do you think of this? So I looked, first of all, the title, Navigating Differences, like that's a huge red flag right off the bat, as we'll get into. But, it's very interesting that this group, specifically Yasser Qadi and Omar Suleiman, are every 6 months now, they have like a cadence where they put out you know, clarifying issues related to sexual ethics in Islam, you know, clarifying LGBT, clarifying transgender. They put out a lecture, they go on a podcast, they put out a position paper. It has happened on average every 6 months for the past 3 years. And most of the time, they're responding directly to something that I've put out or Muslim Skeptic has published or a video. You know, the last major thing that we put out on this topic was Dark Legacy. And if you go to our channel homepage on Muslim Skeptic, you can see that that's one of our top most viewed videos. It's like a documentary, an hour and a half, that goes through the long and convoluted history of what Yasser Qadi and Omar Suleiman, in conjunction with different national orgs, have said about this topic of LGBT and how their position compromises Islam, how their position has, you know, over and over again showed a disregard for basic Islamic ethics, over and over again prioritized political expediency over Islamic principles, over and over again throwing the Muslim community, the Ummah basically, under the bus for the sake of their left-wing stakeholders, their partners, their allies, as they call them. So this is a dark legacy, and the dark legacy continues with this statement. So navigating differences. The thing that happens is I'll give you the inside scoop. I'll give you the inside scoop of what's happening with these imams. The thing is that when these things are published by Muslim Skeptic, they live online, and not everyone is going to see the video, you know, when it comes out. You know, we published Dark Legacy last year, and a lot of people are just seeing it for the first time, and then they're shocked, and they can't believe it. And what did Yasser Qadi say? What did Omar Suleiman say? What did they do? Like another pagan ritual? Like they're just shocked, and it's something that they can't deny, because it's not like, no matter how much they hate me, like if someone hates me, hard to imagine, I know, but if someone hates me, they can't disbelieve their eyes. It's not like I'm just narrating something off the top of my head. Like there's the proof, like there's the video evidence, and there's no AI advanced enough that can doctor video like that. Maybe in the future, that's what they'll claim, actually, that all of this stuff is AI. Oh, well, we said in 2012, that wasn't us. Daniel just made some AI where, you know, I gave a khutbah about allying with Qawm Lut. That's just AI. It never happened. Maybe that they're going to start rewriting history in that way in the future. But for now, people can't deny what they see with their own eyes. Like it's undeniable. They get shocked. They contact these compassionate imams and they say, you know, what's the deal basically? Or I'm so shocked. I'm so disappointed. How could you say that? How could you do that? Especially when it's like a repeated, like it's a trajectory, it's a track record. Like if it's one thing, like if Omar Suleiman on that one fateful day had said, you know, Muslims and non-Muslims, Texans and Floridian, gay and or straight, we're all just going to pray together, stand together, pray together, whatever. You can go look up the clip. If he had just made that kind of statement and nothing else, then we could chalk it up. Look, the guy is under pressure. He is, you know, he wasn't thinking clearly. It was a mistake. Like there are a lot of legitimate excuses that you could make at that point. And even I have made those excuses for these people. I've made those excuses. But at a certain point, it's not just a random mistake. This is a pattern. This is a trajectory. This shows that you have a motive. You have a kind of agenda that you are trying to push onto the Muslim community. And it's not a mistake. You've been advised privately by many people. You have been, you know, you have gotten this kind of feedback privately. You've gotten it publicly now. You've gotten all of this people who are noticing it, and you still don't change your behavior. You don't make the right kind of statements. You can continue to be evasive about it. So that's, this is what they're dealing with on the back end, is people who are shocked and they're confronting them. Hey, why are you making these kinds of statements? Why is Yaqeen Institute publishing this paper that says Muslims should affirm and advocate many LGBT rights, for example, your paper that promotes gay marriage? How can this be possible? Like, how can you, as an Islamic institution run by a scholar, Omar Suleiman, have this kind of content, like published in 2017? And for the longest time, they will try to call me a liar behind the scenes. Okay, in public, they don't want to say my name, but in private, they're talking about me. They're saying Daniel is a liar. Daniel exaggerates. Daniel doesn't know what he's talking about. He just has an agenda. He just he has some jealousy against us. He's just mad at us for personal reasons. Like, they just try to disqualify my testimony. It's hard to do, though, because there's the proof. Like, there's the video, there's the article, there's the screenshot. So they have to reassure these people on the back end, these imams that are contacting them, and now even imams overseas, like internationally, because they're trying to go to all these countries to spread their liberal dawah. They're trying to go to the Muslim world. So they're getting this kind of feedback, and their response is, okay, look, here's a podcast that I just did, or here's a statement that I just wrote, or here's a khutbah that I just gave. And look how strongly I'm against these things, against LGBT and trans ideology. And look at this as proof. And the problem is that some of the imams, they're not going to know, like, the full context. They're not going to know necessarily the full track record. They're not going to know that, oh, okay, you have this kind of statement, but what does it really mean? What does it really mean in the context of American politics, or in the context of the political dynamics, the evolving legal situation for Muslims and other religious groups in the West vis-a-vis sexual ethics and these kinds of rainbow rights, etc., trans ideology, etc. They won't have the entire context because imams are busy. They have so many responsibilities. They're not there to, follow what Yasser Qadi or Omar Suleiman or any of these compassionate imams are doing day to day. They don't have time to do that research. And they've heard from different contacts, oh yeah, Omar Suleiman and so Imam Yasser Qadi, they're trustworthy, they've studied, blah, blah, blah. So they just go on the basis of that kind of testimony without doing the full research. Long story short, my point is that these kinds of statements, like the one that they recently published on navigating differences, they are continuously trying to set the record anew or fresh. They're constantly trying to restart, like do-over. This is what we mean. This is what we're saying on this topic. Forget what our critics have said. What our critics have said is not applicable anymore because all of our past statements are basically mansukh. They're basically abrogated. And this is what we're saying. They won't explicitly say that our past statements are mansukh. They won't publicly acknowledge that because that would acknowledge a mistake. That would acknowledge that, oh, we have really messed up. We have really made a lot of big blunders, and our critics, like Daniel, are right actually for criticizing us. So they won't publicly say that, oh, we're trying to clear the slate. But that's the implication in private. They say, no, this, see, okay, yeah, maybe there were some lapses. That's Omar Suleiman's famous expression. There was some lapse. It was a lapse when I participated in that pagan ritual. But the lapse, okay, there's one lapse, then there's two lapses, then there are three lapses. Then how many lapses can a guy get before he's completely discredited? How many times can you try to set the record straight? So look, at this pattern, and I was trying to give you like a full timeline, but it started, back in 2020, I believe, 2019, 2020, where we started criticizing Yaqeen Institute. Like, hey, you have this paper on your website that's being advocating LGBT rights. Jonathan Brown is saying we have to affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. And you have Yasser Qadi on record saying that, their freedoms are our freedoms, and all of this kind of promotion of a left-wing agenda. And then they have a response. They say, no, this, you've misunderstood. You've misunderstood what we meant and what we intended. They always shift the onus, right? They always shift the blame. It's not them that's wrong. It's us. We're wrong for misunderstanding and not having husn dhann. SubhanAllah. So you'll see this pattern over and over again. Now, every 6 months, we had the live stream, and then there was that infamous response by Jonathan Brown and Shadi Al-Masri. Infamous response where they go and they're interviewed by Muhammad Hijab. And they demanded that interview. Because Muhammad Hijab interviewed me for his podcast. And Muhammad Hijab asked me point blank about Yaqeen Institute. I wasn't planning to talk about Yaqeen Institute in that podcast. But Brother Muhammad, he asked me directly. So I, gave him the unvarnished truth about Yaqeen Institute. So then immediately after, Yaqeen demands, like, we have to have a response. We have to get onto your podcast. And that's what they did. They came on, and it's, lives in infamy. Jonathan Brown's statements about, Lut alayhi salam didn't talk about gay marriage. or a statement that, what was it? I don't support gay marriage. I support the right of gay people to get married. Something like that. You'd think I'd memorize it by at this point, but I have a poor memory. What can I say? So this is, that was another response. Then they had a conference, at Epic Masjid, Yasser Qadi's masjid in Dallas, with Omar Suleiman, with Yasser Qadi, and some other speakers, including like a, radical feminist, talking about, LGBT. Like every time they market it as like, okay, this is our definitive statement. This is our definitive response. And there is no way anyone can misinterpret what we're saying after this. There is no way anyone can consider us to be in support of this after this statement, after this podcast episode. Like Omar Suleiman, what goes on a podcast, and he says that we cannot support anything that goes against the Quran and Sunnah. And he that's supposed to be like the mic drop of this issue. The problem is that, hey, Omar Suleiman, you've said many times that you don't think it contradicts the Quran and Sunnah to ally with these groups. You don't think, like, that was your position. That has been your position. You don't think it contradicts the Quran and Sunnah to ally with these different groups, no matter how, terrible they are, Islamically speaking. So it's like double speak. Everything is double speak. It's coded. It's meant to appease the religious Muslim audience, but also not anger their left-wing supporters when it comes to liberal Muslims, when it comes to liberal institutions, because they teach at liberal institutions. SMU University, at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. Both Yasser Qadi and Omar Suleiman teach there. You think you can be a teacher at a liberal institution, like a liberal college, if you have statements on record that actually represent the Islamic position on fahisha, on fasad? No, you can't have that position. Do you think you get invited to rub elbows with all kinds of politicians? You get to, be invited to make prayer, like read a prayer for Congress? Do you think like the mayor of a major city like Dallas is going to invite you or come to your masjid to talk or whatever if you have statements like that on record? No, you don't. So this is like a major conflict of interest, actually, that Muslims should just in general recognize. Conflict of interest. Like, how can you be a religious leader and an imam advocating, supposedly teaching Orthodox Islam, but you also are committed to these kinds of liberal institutions that are going to require you to censor yourself and to actually not teach Islam completely or properly, because if you do, you're going to lose your position. You're going to lose your position. You're going to lose your access. You're going to lose your network. You're going to lose your money. Big bucks are involved. A lot of money is involved. So this is the problem. And this is the conflict of interest. So they have to kind of do this balancing act where they have to double code everything, double speak, appease the religious Muslims who are not going to be off our case because of this troublemaker, Daniel. But at the same time, we don't want to lose our access. But at the same time, we don't want to lose our position. At the same time, we don't want to lose our money. So this is the issue. Okay, gotta clean up the chat a little bit. I don't know if there's any moderators in the chat. A lot of people spamming the chat, so if there's a moderator there, really clean up this spam. Just block users. I would just block users. Don't have time for this nonsense. Okay. Yeah. So again, like they have khutbah. So people are asking like, oh, have you listened to the recent khutbah by Yasser Qadi on LGBT? Yeah, I have listened to it. It's the same thing. Like that's the thing. Every 6 months, they make the same statement. They don't evolve it, and they don't deviate from the script. It involves basically 3 points. There are 3 points in this script that they just keep massaging. They keep, reworking, recasting, but it's the same essential message over and over again. Number 1, in Islam, gay sex is haram. Number 2, there are only 2 genders. Number 3, there's nothing wrong with desires. It's only if you act on those desires that's problematic in Islam. Having desires is not a sin. Only if you act on those desires is it a sin. These are the 3 points basically over and over and over again they spam. So in the khutbahs, for example, and the thing is that they go really hard on these points. They go really, really hard on these to give the impression that, wow, they are really tough on LGBT. Like in this recent khutbah of Yasser Qadi. He's talking about, we will not allow them to take our children. We will not allow them to do transgender surgery on our children. Never. Like this is, wow. Oh, so you're such a strong opponent of this ideology. Mashallah. Or like this recent statement, this recent paper that we're going to talk about, or a position paper, navigating differences. They're positioning it and positioning themselves as, we are so hardcore against this ideology. We are so strong on this. Gay sex is haram. I don't care who tells me otherwise. It is haram. They have to yell and they have to do this kind of dramatic impression, especially Yasser Qadi. Like he likes to, the theatrics. Others are a little too sensitive, maybe. They're a little too, gentle. But Yasser Qadi, he'll go hard. It is haram. Yeah, we know, bro. We know that. That's not really the question. Like, no one is, like, that's not the big issue. That's not the big conflict. That's not that's not what's at stake in these debates. This is not what is at stake when it comes to what is happening to society with Qawm Lut, modern day Qawm Lut. Right? But you give the impression that you're hardcore going against, the status quo when you're not, especially when you're constantly promoting left-wing politicians and defending them and standing up for them. What happened with Hamza Yusuf, the prime minister, or is he the prime minister, I guess, of Scotland, who, won that position just recently. And then he has this long record of saying, yeah, heterosexuality and homosexuality, it's all the same. And there's nothing wrong with gay sex. And Islam doesn't have any prohibition against that. Or he said something even more egregious. He says, I know what the Quran says. You can't change what the Quran says. But what I'm saying is this is perfectly fine. Something outrageous kufr like that. And you had Mufti Yasser Nadim, you had Muhammad Hijab come out and basically make takfir of Hamza Yusuf. And then who pops up to defend Hamza Yusuf? Oh, Yasser Qadi. It says, this is so extreme. Like, we should not be extreme. We have to have a middle approach, we are the middle nation. We have to have this kind of moderate approach. We don't need to deny the good of Hamza Yusuf. We have to support him in making sure that we can bring out as much benefit from him as possible. Like this defense of Hamza Yusuf right after. So how is this not speaking out of both sides of your mouth? Like, you're on the one hand giving the khutbah, oh, trans is blah 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 blah, and pretending like you're so strong on this issue. Well, Hamza Yusuf, this politician, this brown politician who claims to be Muslim, a lot of his policies have to do with, trans rights, trans children, proper pronoun usage. If you don't use proper pronouns, this is considered a hate crime. He's in favor of all of those things. So how are you able to? And the thing is that Hamza Yusuf specifically, it's not like some marginal part of his platform. The same thing was the case with Ilhan Omar. When it comes to LGBT, it's at the top of their platform. It is at the top of their policy considerations is Qawm Lut rights. And we pointed this out in Dark Legacy as well. If you go to Ilhan Omar's page, her official campaign page, the first priority, the first policy priority is Qawm Lut rights. Right there. Not Muslim rights, not Palestine, not anything like that. This is like a deliberate thing. Like, it's the dynamic there is that the Muslim politician has to present him or herself as not Muslim, basically, as very liberal as possible in order to be accepted by the political establishment. Well, that's a whole different conversation. But, Yasser Qadi, Omar Suleiman, they've been 100% support of these politicians. You won't find a single statement against these politicians in the sense that, Muslims should not support Hamza Yusuf or Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib or Keith Ellison or any of these politicians that are at the front lines of the pride marches. There's absolutely no pushback. So what do you think the Muslim community thinks of this? So that's the context that we have to read these statements in light of. Or we hear a khutbah and rather think, instead of being moved by emotionality, instead of being moved by your positive impression or your positive thoughts about the speaker, even me, okay, you like what I have to say, listen to what I say and evaluate it objectively according to the Quran and Sunnah. With these figures as well, don't get wrapped up in the emotionality. Listen to what they're actually saying. Carefully consider, carefully read, and then judge on the basis of the Quran and Sunnah. So this is what I've been advocating. If you do that, then you will see, like, they won't be able to trick you. They won't be able to deceive you because you'll know immediately. And this is what happened. When we put out Dark Legacy, Omar Suleiman and Yaqeen Institute put out a webinar to once again clarify their stance. Yasser Qadi put out like an interview that he did with another imam at his masjid, clarifying his stance again, once again. And they're this webinar, that interview, it clarified nothing. It just repeated the same talking points. Gay sex is haram. There are two genders. You are not liable in front of Allah for your desires that you can't control, only for your actions. That's all they keep spamming. They repeat it over and over again. They just package it differently. Meanwhile, they ignore the actual criticism. They ignore the actual question. Well, what about these politicians? What about allying with these groups? What should we think about a society that is rapidly changing before our eyes? And these kinds of programs coming from every direction that are trying to normalize this kind of Qawm Lut ideology. They are in our schools. They are in our libraries. They are at our workplace. They are coming to the masjid. What should we think about that? What should our moral stance be on all of these things? That is what we want to know. We know that gay sex is haram. We know that. Thanks for clarifying that for the 50th time. We know that there are two genders. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. What about these other issues? What about these other issues that you refuse to address? You know why you refuse to address it? The observant Muslim will think, why are they refusing to address this? Why are they refusing to make a simple statement like, I condemn Ilhan Omar? Why? Why can't they say that? Again, they have a conflict of interest. They have a major conflict of interest. This is why they cannot be in these positions of religious leadership or authority. They should not be allowed to teach Islam. Frankly, that's the truth. Until they get rid of their conflict of interest, they correct all of their batil, this dark legacy that they have. They correct it. They clarify it. They get rid of all of their conflict of interest. How can anyone take them seriously? How can anyone trust them? Especially Yasser Qadi, like of all people, because he openly calls himself a reformist. He openly calls for reforming Islam. Go to his Facebook page. He openly calls for reforming Islam. He openly says that he's trying to get conservative Muslims to adopt non-conservative positions through reform, through what he calls hermeneutics, tradition-based hermeneutics or something like that. You can watch, the video on our channel about that topic, Yasser Qadi's agenda for reform, for reforming Islam. So they are making it very clear who they are. They're making it very clear who they are. And some Muslims just don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe what they're seeing with their own eyes. A lot of you, I think the majority, I think the scale is tipping, actually. I think more and more people are realizing, look, this is a pattern. This is not just some random mistake. More and more people, alhamdulillah, they're realizing what's going on. And this is why they're getting more desperate. They are losing their grip, and they have to make these kinds of desperate pleas, like begging imams, please sign this paper, sign this statement, navigating differences. Why are they pleading and begging for imams to sign this? Because they want to bring all of those imams under their umbrella. And they did this already. They did this already in 2016 with a statement. It was called the Joint Orlando Letter. Let me show you a screenshot of that. Let's here. So this was in 2016. And I have a whole Twitter thread analyzing this statement. And when it came out in 2016, I criticized this letter. I told imams, please don't sign this. This is really bad. This is normalizing Qawm Lut rights. This is normalizing, all of the Qawm Lut policies that they want to impose on society, and they want Muslims to accept too. So if you look at the signatures on this, it's a long list of people who signed on to this statement. and a lot of good imams and scholars, and a lot of liberals and liberal activists. You have Linda Sarsour is signed on to this. I believe Zahra Billu and a bunch of activists like that who are just pure liberals. This was a collaboration by the supposed traditional scholars and the activists, and they included statements in this joint letter that basically acknowledges Qawm Lut rights. And to understand that, go see my analysis of it on Twitter, because I don't want to go through this entire letter and the new letter. But go back and go to the Twitter thread or go to my Telegram channel. I also discussed this, where I analyze this letter and explain the problems with it. The thing is that it's worded in such a way that it's difficult for a religious Muslim to immediately understand what is so problematic about it. How is it contradictory to Islam? And the same thing happened with this new letter, this navigating differences. A lot of commenters are saying, or some of the imams, for example, that contacted me, I don't really understand what's wrong. Like, it seems to be a good letter. It seems to be perfectly fine, Islamically speaking. But that's the thing. It's coded. They take a lot of things that are unobjectionable and perfectly acceptable Islamically, and they make sure to foreground those things. And then they bury the bottle, they bury the poison in such a way that you won't recognize it. Your guard has been thrown off, or your guard has been taken down because you see, oh, they're citing the Quran and they're talking about the Sunnah, and oh, they're talking about how it is important to stand for our principles. Oh, okay, this is going to be fine. So you let your guard down, and then you won't be as easily able to notice the poison. And the poison is everything, because once you sign on to the statement, you've signed on to all of it. You can't go back and say later that, oh no, I disagree with, just this paragraph. No, your name is there. So, I mean, I'm not saying you can't disavow the statement after the fact. There's no problem. Like, people make mistakes, and especially when these compassionate imams, the Dawah Mafia, and the level of their deception, that's something that good intention, well-intentioned, good imams can fall into. No problem. So you can disavow, say, look, I signed this as a mistake. So go to Twitter and check out the thread that I have on the joint Muslim statement from 2016, because the 2023 statement is just a repetition, basically. In many ways, it's a rehashing. Again, they repeat the same talking points, the same basic core is repeated. They just repackage it differently as basically a new ruse, a new trick, a new way to lure traditional imams to sign off on something that is essentially Qawm Lut rights. Pro Qawm Lut rights. That's basically what's happening. So without further ado, let's get into navigating differences. Let's look at this statement. And I want to do something that we do at Al-Asna Institute. It's my institute where we have all kinds of courses. And every week we have a halaqah, like a live stream halaqah with the students. And we engage in different kinds of exercises so that we can develop skills as students. And one of the skills that we try to develop at Al-Asna Institute is the skill of close reading. Can you closely read a document and analyze it in light of the things that we learn, at the Institute in our courses? So close reading is very critical for these important types of documents. Why? Because we often skim. We are trained to skim because of social media. We just like scrolling through the apps. People barely read, even people who are in high positions, like as imams. But you cannot skim documents like this, and you can't skim very sensitive posts like this and information like this. You have to read it line by line with a critical eye. This is very important. And as a Muslim, everyone should have this skill. So we can practice it together with this document as we, go through it line by line, inshallah. So let me pull it up. Okay. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. Okay, so let's start with the title, Navigating Differences. So like I mentioned earlier, like as soon as I read that title, I knew it was not going to be good. As soon as I saw the title, I shook my head and I thought, here we go again. Another failed attempt to clarify, to actually clarify. Not to pretend clarify, but to actually clarify. This is going to be another failed attempt. Why? Navigating differences? Like, what does that mean? Like, if you want to translate differences like ikhtilaf, like there are differences that we have when it comes to Qawm Lut. We have some differences. So we have to navigate the differences between Islam and Qawm Lut, Muslims and Qawm Lut. How can we navigate the differences? So just there by the title, like the title tells you everything. The title tells you everything about what this is going to be about and what they really intend with this document. Like this is just a PR type of statement to appease liberals. Okay. This is just by the title, you know that that's the case. Clarifying sexual and gender ethics in Islam, clarifying it like on things that are supposedly people are so confused about Islam being against gay sex. Like people are so confused about that. People are so confused. Really? So let's actually look at this. So again, this was published yesterday. Okay, so it starts. Public discourse on sexuality over the past few decades has presented challenges to faith communities. So what do you think about that sentence? Public discourse on sexuality over the past few decades, so 30 years, has presented challenges to faith communities. Okay, the discourse is creating challenges. Like this is, I don't know about you, but this is a very, it's beyond diplomatic. Like I don't consider what Qawm Lut, modern day Qawm Lut is doing as presenting challenges. Or just imagine Lut alayhi salam, Prophet Lut alayhi salam, saying, oh, Qawm Lut is presenting challenges. These people that are, threatening me and my family, they're presenting challenge. Their discourse is presenting challenges. Just imagine that. Okay, this is how the statement starts. Okay, and this is this sounds like it was written by liberal consultants, like maybe not even non-Muslims, like maybe liberal consultants wrote this statement. Allahu alam. Maybe if Yasser Qadi joins us on the stream, he can clarify. Was this written by like McKinsey? Was this written by a consulting firm or a PR firm? Did they get involved, like to get the language, as non-objectionable as possible? The public discourse has presented some challenges for our faith communities. So just imagine Qawm Lut presenting you challenges. Today, Islamic sexual and gender ethics are at odds with certain recently popular societal views, causing tension from Muslims between their religious beliefs and societal expectations. So again, like Qawm Lut is at odds with Lut alayhi salam. They're causing tension. Oh, there's so much tension. So they're just framing, like this is all framing. And also it's interesting how they're framing it as a tension between Muslims and society. I think that is an interesting choice because I think that the majority of society, increasingly so, is on the side of Muslims. Like when you look at the type of reaction that people have to things like Drag Queen Story Hour happening at libraries, at schools for with kindergartners, when you look at things like certain books, that are being put in schools, how the curriculum is being changed. You have the, different international organizations that are recommending children as young as 2 or 3 to be taught, certain sexual subjects. Most of society is against that. Most of society is actually at odds, to use their language, with that. So it's actually not a conflict between Muslims and wider society. It's a conflict between society and liberal powers, liberal secular powers that are pushing this agenda. That's what the real conflict is about. But, this is how they're framing it, that, oh, this is a conflict between Muslims and wider society. That's conceding already way too much. It's misinterpreting, improperly framing the entire issue. So at the same time, public disapproval of LGBTQ practices, beliefs, and advocacy is increasingly met with charges of intolerance and unwarranted accusations of bigotry. So you have the advocates of Qawm Lut practices and beliefs that are calling Muslims intolerant. This is a big problem. I guess we need to show how tolerant we are of their practices and beliefs. More troubling still, there is an increasing push to promote LGBTQ-centric values among children through legislation and regulations, disregarding parental consent and denying both parents and children the opportunity to express conscientious objection. So look at the confusion in just this one sentence, right? Let's just focus on this one sentence. Can you guys see that? Just highlighted it a little bit. So, increasing push to promote LGBTQ-centric values among children through legislation and regulations. The legislation and regulations has been pushed for over a decade, right? In the Western world, you could say it's even been pushed for the past 2 decades in the overall Western world. But in the US, it's basically been in the past decade that they're pushing legislation. They legalized gay marriage, for example, in 2015. There's all kinds of regulations regarding discrimination. There's all kinds of regulations regarding, accommodations of bathrooms and different ordinances related to businesses, how businesses can operate regarding, Qawm Lut. All of this has been happening for a long time. This is not new. So, but what they're pointing out, like as what is troubling still, is the new stuff, basically, that now it's being pushed on children. Well, where was your protest when it was being pushed on adults, when it was being pushed on businesses, when it was being pushed on public schools, when it was being pushed on Islamic schools, actually? Because if you look at the other countries, like in the UK, or even if you look at continental Europe, like Germany or France, this is being, even more aggressively pushed onto the Muslim community at the governmental level through legislation and regulations. Where was the statements? Where was the outcry? Where was the objection, the Islamic objection to all of that? There was nothing. There was just silence, and you get a Yaqeen article about how Muslims must or should affirm and advocate many LGBTQ rights. That was the stance of these people. okay, who now are, for some reason, troubled by children being targeted. And notice that what they have a problem with is you're disregarding parental consent. So this is like a very right-wing conservative way to put it. Like the problem that we have is there's no parental consent. If there was parental, give parents the option. Give parents the option. Is that what we really want? We just want to make sure that, oh, yeah, just teach, the kindergartners and the elementary school children about Qawm Lut and how they're beautiful and amazing, but only if you get consent from the parents. So your children are going to go to those public schools. So even if your Muslim child sits out on those classes, I don't know how, because it's everywhere. You can't go to a public school now without rainbow flags and without, celebration of this basically every single day. But even if your child avoids the specific sessions about courses or the specific sessions regarding LGBTQ centric values, the other kids that they're in class with, their peers, are all going to have those beliefs. How quickly do you think that the beliefs of their peers are going to transfer to them? So this is nonsense. How can you're making a big deal about the parental consent? What about our right to express conscientious objection? As if like that would make it better. Like that would make the situation better. We just have a problem with our inability to opt out. I mean, right-wing conservatives are even more like non-Muslim right-wing conservatives are even more like, as weak as right-wing conservatives are on this issue, they're still stronger than these compassionate imams, because the right-wing conservatives say that we are troubled by the fact that it's in schools. We're troubled, at least elementary schools. They say, oh, after elementary school, then no problem. Teach them all about Qawm Lut. But at least preserve the elementary schools. This statement isn't even going that far. This statement is saying like, well, there's lack of consent. There needs to be opportunity to express conscientious objection. So they're not even, so these compassionate imams are even more left than like mainstream conservatives. Like that's how pathetic this is. Yeah, you guys still with me here? Let's continue. Such policies subvert the agency of Muslim parents to teach their children their religiously grounded sexual ethics, violate their constitutional right to freely practice their religion, and contribute to an atmosphere of intolerance toward faith communities. So this is the objection, and this is what's going to repeat over and over again in this document, in this statement, is appeal to the constitutional rights. You are violating our constitutional rights. We cannot freely practice our religion because of these policies. There's an atmosphere of intolerance. So which policies exactly is it? Which policies? It's not clear. Is it the policies for the children, like through legislation and regulation, promoting LGBTQ centric values to children? Or are you speaking more generally? Like what is really subverting the agency? So I guess they say the agency of Muslim parents to teach their children, practice their religion, like what is being violated? So this is what we're going to find out in the rest of the document, because it's not very clear. What we'll also realize is that this appeal to the Constitution, like it's violating our constitutional right to freely practice. Well, the Constitution does not, it's constantly being reinterpreted, first of all. So it was reinterpreted by the Supreme Court as something that guarantees equal rights regardless of sexual orientation. And when it comes to discrimination policy, this is actually the debate in the US. In other countries, they don't care. But in the US, they say, well, you have religious rights and then you have the sexual minority rights, the LGBTQ rights, and there needs to be a balance. In other countries, they say, no, forget religion. We're not going to, we don't consider religious rights. You have to teach this curriculum. You have to stop discriminating in terms of your teaching at your masajid, in terms of your businesses and employment. You can't discriminate. They don't care about this, a religious right that you have. But that is increasingly the situation in the US. In the US also, the understanding of the Constitution is changing. And they're constantly trying to put LGBT as this protected class that you cannot discriminate against. You cannot discriminate against. So if you are a masjid and you want to have an imam and you get a bunch of applications and you reject some applications because they are not straight, the imam is not straight, then this can be considered discrimination. You could be taken to court, or you could be, you can be penalized legally for that. Like, that's not the case right now, but they're trying to do that. They're trying to do that. They're trying to expand. They're trying to, again, make Qawm Lut, this orientation, quote unquote, as they call it, they're trying to make it as a protected class like race or sex. And they're winning. They're winning these judgments in the highest courts in the land, including the Supreme Court. And the people who are writing this document know that. They know that the constitutional rights are being expanded to include many LGBT rights. They know that. So when they constantly are appealing to constitutional rights, there is a reason why they're doing that. Do you see where I'm going with this? Think about it and it'll become more clear. Continuing, we are Muslim scholars and preachers representing a diverse range of theological schools. Below is our collective, nonpartisan articulation of Islam's position on sexual and gender ethics. As a religious minority that frequently experiences bigotry and exclusion, we reject the notion that moral disagreement amounts to intolerance or incitement of violence. So again, you're framing Muslims as a minority, when in fact, I think on many of these issues, the majority of society agrees, or a large body of society actually agrees with Muslims that we're tired of this. We are tired of this agenda. We don't want this anymore. We want to actually reverse certain things. I think that's what the majority of society is actually leaning towards. But again, there's a framing of Muslims as a minority. And again, think about Lut alayhi salam, the prophet. He was just one man. Like, his wife wasn't even on his side. But he stood strong and he told his people, he told Qawm Lut to desist. He told them to stop. He told them, he spoke to them in the strongest terms. He said that this, what you're doing, is detestable. This is something that is al-fahisha. This is something that is a crime. And he was just one man. And he was able to say this to a much larger group that was attacking him in a very aggressive way. But now we have, 2023, compassionate imams. Oh, we're weak minorities. Please, stop the exclusion. Stop excluding us. Trust us. We're not intolerant. We're not inciting anything. Please. This is a very weak position. This is a weak position. It's a cowardly position. But this is what is setting the tone, because we're just in the introduction of this. So they're positioning Muslims as being on the back foot. Like, we have to appeal to the Constitution. We have to appeal to your morality. We have to appeal to your morality of, and it's not even conservative morality or, a particularly religious morality. It's the Constitution, because Even the left wing agrees with the Constitution, right? So we appeal to the Constitution and our constitutional rights. We're a minority. The left wing loves minorities, right? You want to exclude us loyal Muslims? We're such a we're a model minority. Why are you excluding us? So they're going to anchor the entire statement and the entire moral thrust of this statement in this kind of way, not in a position of opposition, not in a position of we are on the truth and this this agenda, this movement, whatever, this campaign, this re-engineering of society, pushing modern day Qawm Lut, we reject that. This is evil. This is satanic. This is satanic. This is going to destroy society. This is going to cause untold harm. It has been. On the basis of the Quran, we look at our Prophet Lut alayhi salam, and we see his example and what he said to his people, and that's our model. We're following his sunnah. You don't get any of that in this. You don't get any of that in this. You don't get any of that in any of the statements from these guys, from Yasser Qadi or Omar Suleiman. Never. They never will say something, or they never have said something like that. In the future, maybe. Allah guide us all. But they have never said something like that in this context. In this context, making a position statement. So that's this point. Continuing, we affirm our right to express our beliefs while simultaneously recognizing our constitutional obligation to exist peacefully with those whose beliefs differ from ours. Okay, so again, the constitutional obligation. It's important that they keep emphasizing the constitutional obligation, the Constitution of the United States or of Canada, because a lot of Canadian Imams also signed on to this. They are emphasizing the Constitution. Why? Because the Constitution, guess what? Especially in Canada, but also in the US, it is understood legally as being pro-LGBT rights. The constitutions of the United States and Canada and Europe, all these European countries, they're all pro-LGBT documents. So when you say, oh, we recognize our constitutional obligation, what they're saying is we accept the obligation that we have to exist peacefully with those whose beliefs differ from ours. You can't read the word peacefully without reading the constitutional obligation, because it's peacefully as defined by the Constitution. So when the Constitution says that, look, this is legal, gay marriage is legal, when the Constitution says that you can't discriminate in your business or your mosque or your Islamic school or public schools, you can't discriminate. You have to treat this as, this is just another minority that's protected. You can't speak against them. You have to use their pronouns. You have to do this, all the obligations. You have to accommodate different bathrooms, etc., etc., etc. That's being what the left wing is arguing, and the right wing has, for the most part, accepted on most of the agenda, is that those kinds of rights are from the Constitution, because the Constitution has clauses about equality, non-discrimination. So what the Supreme Court has done is interpret the Constitution to include these Qawm Lut rights. And they know that, okay? The signatories of this document, or the people who wrote this document, like Yasser Qadi, they know that. And they've argued that. Jonathan Brown, the guy who's infamous for his passionate defense of Qawm Lut rights, he's a signatory on this document. Allahu Alam how much he has contributed to writing it. But he's stated multiple times, like, look, this is the Constitution. This is what the law of the land says. We have to follow the law of the land. Meanwhile, there are many people in society, by the way, non-Muslims, who are objecting the law because the law is in the process of being written. Like, these are ongoing cases, and they are objecting this conscientious objection that the statement refers to, but only when it comes to parental consent in schools, but not when it comes to the overall policy within society, the laws that are being written as we speak, the court deliberations that are happening as we speak, the sessions in Congress, the sessions in the Supreme Court that are happening as we speak, writing this law. Where's the objection there? Where's the conscientious objection to that? You won't find it in this document, and you won't find it in the statements of the aforementioned compassionate Imams. You won't find it. Again, why? Conflict of interest. That's what the liberal establishment wants. Normalization, expansion of Qawm Lut rights. People who are on the payroll of liberal power cannot speak out. They can only pretend to speak out with meaningless letters like this. I mean, it's not meaningless. It's meaningful. It's meaningful in affirming the liberal paradigm. Okay. So then, this exists peacefully. This means everything. This means everything, because they know, like, what a Muslim, like a religious Muslim, will read when they see this. A religious Muslim will say, "Yeah, of course, Muslims live peacefully. We don't advocate violence against other groups. We are against any kind of vigilantism. We are against any kind of, crimes being committed. We obey the law. We are peaceful. We obey the law. We can object to the law. We can protest the law. We can try to get the law changed, but we obey the law." That's what 99% of Muslims will read when they see exist peacefully. But this is the coding that I was referring to before. Peacefully has to be interpreted with the constitutional obligation. Like, what does existing peacefully mean according to the Constitution? So the example is the Colorado baker, who there was a gay couple who demanded that this Christian baker bake them a cake for their gay wedding. It went to the Supreme Court. It's constantly being litigated, and the Christian baker said, "No, that's against my religious beliefs to bake that cake for your gay wedding." And the gay couple sued him, took him to court. "This is discrimination. You're violating our rights." And that's constantly being litigated, because every time it gets dismissed or the courts rule in favor of the Christian baker, they initiate another complaint against this particular baker. So there's a whole history there that's very interesting. But the argument that's being made is that we cannot exist peacefully if the Christian baker does not bake our cake. This is discrimination. This is not peaceful. This is hate. This is bigotry. So that's what they're arguing, that the Constitution considers that to be bigotry and hate, that you're discriminating against us by not baking the cake, or by not having not allowing us to use your bathrooms, for example. That is the coding that they use. They use a word, like they use a term, and they craft the sentence in a way that's not going to be objectionable to a religious Muslim who's not reading carefully and is not thinking about what's the implication of this. And then furthermore, like when it comes to Muslim belief, like, do we have to make statements about existing peacefully with every group, especially groups that we consider to be immoral, like groups that we consider to be like, do we have to make a statement about that we recognize our constitutional obligation to live peacefully with drug dealers or heroin addicts? Do we have to make statements like that? Do we have to make statements about we recognize our constitutional obligation to exist peacefully with gamblers, people who gamble? Well, why is that necessary to say that? And it seems like, there's this kind of, they're playing into the stereotype that Muslims are just violent. Muslims are violent. And I mean, this is the accusation that's made against Muslims. But rather than rebut that by saying that, excuse me, like, we're not the aggressive ones here. We're not the ones who are trying to ram this agenda down everyone's throat. You guys are doing that. But you want us to be peaceful. How about you be peaceful? Instead of making that very obvious observation, they use this very twisted language. So where we have to recognize our constitutional obligation to exist peacefully with basically Qawm Lut. No. Like, how can we live peacefully? Yeah, of course, we obey the law. We don't advocate violence. We don't incite violence. But we're not going to accept, like, we're not going to be in peace and harmony. We're opposed to what you're doing. Like, we recognize the harm that is being caused by the fahisha that you're spreading and have been spreading for all these years. But this statement says, no, we recognize our constitutional obligation to exist peacefully with you guys. So, let's see. And then what people will always bring up is that, oh, well, Muslims live with other minority groups or communities, but we should not view Qawm Lut as a community. That's the other thing. They're not a community. Even to a certain extent, they don't view themselves as a community, like a religious community. It's like an activist group, basically, that's just pushing for more and more freedom. Like, we want more and more freedom to do more and more of what we want, to be more and more sexually liberated. How can this be considered a community? Like, Islam recognizes communities on different bases, but usually it's on the basis of shared belief. Like, you're a Christian community, you're Ahl al-Kitab, you're a Jewish community, or the kuffar, the non-believers, the mushrikeen, the idolaters. Like, these are the kinds of communities. But people who just want to expand freedom of choice, sexual freedom, they want to spread fahisha, like, that's not a community in the same way. So why should they be treated like a community? Like, this is the argument that Omar Suleiman constantly makes, is that, well, we can work with other communities. And look at Hilf al-Fudul, look at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, look at, like, how you can work with other groups and treat them as, other communities and collaborate with them. And that's why we have to be in support of allyship with pro-LGBT and with all of these different kinds of Qawm Lut networks. But this is a false argument just on the face of it, because he's making a false analogy. Like, Qawm Lut is not a community in that way. From the Islamic standpoint, this is like a group of fusaq, transgressors, criminals. Like, they're not a community in the sense that Christians are a community or Ahl al-Kitab is a community. So this is just a false analogy that's being made. So, and communities have other aspects too, other than just shared beliefs. Communities have structures, like they have maybe kinship structure, shared traditions, shared norms. But that's nothing like modern day Qawm Lut. Like, they don't have any of that. All they are united by is the push for more and more fahisha, more and more freedom to engage in fahisha. That's all that unites them. How can you exist peacefully with that? It's not that Muslims are not peaceful. It's that group will not allow it. That group will not allow Muslims to live without forcing them to accept it. And that's exactly what we read in the Quran. That's exactly what we read about Qawm Lut. Okay, so let's continue. The source of morality for Muslims. So, I mean, this can be a bit ambiguous if you say source of morality, um, because they're saying for Muslims. Do they mean that the morality in the Quran regarding Qawm Lut is just for Muslims and not non-Muslims? It could be read in that way. So, but I'm not saying that that's the only interpretation. It's also factual that, okay, the source of morality for Muslims and everyone else. That would be the more correct way to put it, because morality, what is right and wrong, is ultimately defined by Allah and revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah. That is morality for everyone, not just for Muslims. So maybe it's just implied, or maybe they are actually applying this kind of liberal view, the liberal Muslim view, that, well, the Quran and Sunnah are just for Muslims, which is not true. Yeah, there are certain things that are just for Muslims. Like, you have to accept Islam for it to be applicable to you, like giving zakat, or praying 5 times a day. That's Muslims. Like, there's no expectation that a non-Muslim would do that, right? But there are many things there are many moral imperatives that the Quran gives that apply to non-Muslims as well. Like the moral imperative to accept Islam. The moral imperative to accept, belief. That's a moral imperative on non-Muslims. But even beyond that, the moral imperative, like when it comes to many things that we can call ma'ruf, things that are ma'ruf, they're well known as being good. That's not just limited to Muslims. That's something that is universal. Like things like taking care of orphans, taking care of the poor, not, burying your daughters, for example. That's ma'ruf. Like, it's known that this is something wrong. And the Quran condemns the non-Muslims who engage in that kind of behavior. Just like Lut alayhi salam condemned his people who were non-believers for their immorality, their fahisha. So this title is ambiguous, is all I'm saying. It's ambiguous, and it could be read like this ambiguity feeds into that incorrect interpretation, that it's like a secular liberal interpretation that, well, the moral imperatives of the Quran only apply to Muslims and only if you accept them, right? Because everything is about choice. Everything is about freedom of choice. So if you don't accept them or you're non-Muslim, then feel free to ignore. This is actually not, this is not the message of the Quran. The Quran is for all people. And its moral imperatives are for all people, contrary to this kind of liberal view. The most essential requirement for accepting Islam is to submit to God completely, voluntarily, and lovingly. Okay, so you can analyze this statement. Completely, voluntarily, and lovingly. Okay, it's an interesting, it's not like objectionable, but it's just interesting turn of phrase. God says, it is not for a believing man or woman when God and his messenger sallallahu decree a matter to have any other choice in that matter. Okay, so a religious Muslim reads the first sentence and thinks, mashallah, great, we're burning on all cylinders right now. This is great, we love it. Rightfully so. You're quoting the Quran, you're making a strong statement. By submitting to God, we declare that only He possesses absolute knowledge and wisdom. Therefore, it follows from this submission that the ultimate source and basis of morality is divine guidance, not just reason or societal trends. Okay, so again, like, strong statement. Yeah, we're on board. This sounds great. We love it. Okay. What we'll notice is that they're appealing to the divine guidance, but we'll see that they're going to be very light on citing that divine guidance in the actual statement. I'll point that out in a second. Continuing, Islam enjoys a rich tradition of jurisprudence that allows for diverse perspectives and accommodates various cultural norms. However, particular principles that are explicitly stated in Revelation, known to be necessary elements of Islam and unanimously agreed upon by qualified scholars, are deemed immutable and not open to revision by any person or entity, including the highest religious authorities. Wow, okay. Very strong. As God asserts, and the word of your Lord has been fulfilled in truth and justice, none can alter his words, and he is the all-hearing, the all-knowing. Subhanallah. Okay, that's great. Sounds good. So what this takes your guard down. This takes your guard down, and then you are going to be inclined to think that you're going to be inclined to overlook or skim other parts of this statement. So now they get to the crux of the matter, Islam's position on sexuality and gender. How are we doing on time, by the way? Okay. Looks like we're good on time. By the way, guys, we'll have some Q&A as well, inshallah. When we get through the statement, I'll open it up to Q&A so that you can ask me questions and discuss. So just stay tuned for that. Oh, also, you can send super chats. So if you want me to answer a question, you want to raise or get my attention on something, send a super chat. So the way that you can send it, I've already explained, like it's best to send it directly. Just go to muslimskeptic.com and then go to the contribution tab or the donation tab. And then you can enter the amount that you want to donate. And then in the message box, put your question. And I'll read those, inshallah. So you can just queue them up. Just send those kinds of super chats and then I'll read them live. Okay, so going back. The crux of the matter now. Islam's position on sexuality and gender. By a decree from God, sexual relations are permitted within the bounds of marriage, and marriage can only occur between man and a woman. Okay, so saying that gay sex is haram, basically. In the Quran, God explicitly condemns sexual relations with the same sex, such as in Surah An-Nisa, verse 16, Al-A'raf, these ayats, and Surah An-Naml, 55 through 58. Now, what's interesting to me, maybe it's interesting to you as well, why did they not cite these verses or quote them in full? Why aren't they quoting the verses? Because this is what the whole statement is about, right? You said that we are grounded in divine guidance, or divine guidance is the source of our morality for Muslims. That's what you said in the previous section. And you're citing all other kinds of Quranic ayat. In many places, you're citing ayats of the Quran. That's great, But the whole statement is about sexual ethics, and you don't cite you don't quote them. You don't quote the central ayat. Why? Why are you not quoting them? Let us read what they are. And, I think they deliberately left it out. I think they deliberately left it out because it's not very compassionate when we actually go to those ayat. So let's look at, for example, A'raf in those verses. So can you see this? This is in the Quran, Surah Al-A'raf. Let me expand it so you can see what it says correctly. And remember when Lut scolded the men of his people, saying, "Do you commit a shameful deed that no man has ever done before? You lust after men instead of women. You are certainly transgressors." But his people's only response was to say, "Expel them from your land. They are people who wish to remain chaste." So he saved him and his family, except his wife, who was one of the doomed. SubhanAllah. So this is a powerful ayat, very clearly explaining, like in just such few words, the core idea, the core morality, what our orientation, our moral orientation should be about this entire issue. You are committing al-fahisha, this shameful immorality, iniquity. You lust after men instead of women, shahwatan, the shahwa that you have. Okay, you are transgressors, musrifun. Right? This is very strong language. And then the response of Qawm Lut, expel them. Expel them. They wish to remain chaste, or they wish to remain pure. Strong. That what does that imply about Qawm Lut? Is that they don't like purity. They don't like purity and cleanliness and chastity. So he saved him and his family, except his wife, who was one of the doomed. This is going to doom society. This is a destruction that is being referred to in the Quran. So this is so powerful, such a chilling message to humanity from the Quran, from Allah, the Creator, Azza wa Jal. So this is Surah Al-A'raf. They cite it, they don't quote it. Why? Then we have Surah An-Naml. Oh, is this Naml or A'raf? Oh, Naml. Let me expand this. So again, a repetition from Lut. Do you really lust after men instead of women? In fact, you are only a people acting ignorantly. You're people acting ignorant. I guess it's hard to coexist peacefully if you're calling people ignorant. If you're calling them shameful, if you're calling them ignorant, if you're calling them transgressors, if you're saying that they're doomed, it's hard to coexist harmoniously, as the document says. But his people's only response was to say, expel Lot's followers from your land. They are people who wish to remain chaste. So this is very clear, like what these people are about. So we delivered him and his family, except his wife. We had destined her to be one of the doomed. I guess his wife wanted to coexist peacefully. His wife wanted to coexist harmoniously. She wanted to navigate the differences. Let's put it that way. See, subhanAllah, like, isn't that apt? And we poured upon them a rain of brimstone. How evil was the rain of those who had been warned. So matar rained upon them their adhab. How can you, was Lut alayhi salam coexisting peacefully? Like it was not possible. It was not possible because of the actions of those people, the actions of Qawm Lut, and also the punishment, the adhab that rained upon everyone. So they don't cite that, or they don't quote the actual ayat. And I think there's a very clear reason why they did not do it, because the tenor of this statement does not match the tenor of the Quran. You know what I mean by tenor, right? The Quran and the power and the beauty of the Quran and the insight of the Quran is that it conveys so much in so few words. In just reading those ayat, subhanAllah, you just get it. You get what is happening. You get the entire story. You get the entire nature of this issue. in just 3, 4, 5 ayat. And it gives you not only the morality of the issue, it tells you the emotion, what you should feel, how you should feel. Like you get that. It gives you so much to ponder and to think about this history, about what happened, what they did, why they deserve that kind of adhab from Allah. You get that. You get so much from those ayat. They don't quote them. They don't quote the ayat. They have no problem quoting ayat. Like it's not because they're trying to be brief or succinct in their document. No, they quote a lot of other things, but they don't quote those ayat. I think it's telling. Like, for example, they quote the ayat on fornication, zina. Moreover, premarital and extramarital sexual acts are prohibited in Islam. As God explains, do not go near fornication. It is truly an immoral deed and a terrible way to behave. In Surah Al-Isra, these aspects of Islam are unambiguously established in the Quran, the teachings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and a chain of scholarly traditions spanning 14 centuries. So it's interesting, what they quote and what they do not quote. So being against fornication, that's not politically incorrect. Saying that you will be doomed for fahisha, that is really politically incorrect. that is quite politically incorrect. And if you want to give the impression that it's all about peace and harmony and coexistence, then you can't have those ayat in your statement. Put 2 and 2 together, guys. This is what close reading is about. This is what critical close reading is about. These guys, these charlatans, are trying to pull the wool over your eyes so you don't see what's right in front of you. Don't give them that power. Don't give them that power to control what you think about them and what you think about this issue. We have the Quran, alhamdulillah, it's a light and it's a guidance, and we will never abandon it. But if you really want to abide by the Quran and follow the guidance of the Quran, then make sure that your understanding of this topic about sexual ethics, about everything, is on the basis of that Quran. Is firmly on the basis of the Quran to the letter, to the T. That's all. Then you can understand what is happening. You will know, you'll just feel off about this kind of statement. Something won't feel right. This is not satisfying. There's something wrong here. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, you'll just feel it. Okay. So let's see. Let me continue. So as a result, they have gained the status of religious consensus, ijma', and are recognized as integral components of the faith known to the general body of Muslims. So this was a little bit unclear. Maybe you can help me understand. What is they referring to? They have gained the status of religious consensus. These aspects of Islam? These aspects of Islam have gained the status of religious consensus. So these aspects, what are these aspects referring to? It's referring to the marriage only between a man and a woman, explicitly condemning same-sex relations, and condemning premarital and extramarital sexual acts. Okay. I guess that makes sense. It's like the antecedent of this pronoun is removed. You have to follow the chain to understand exactly what's being referred to. A chain of antecedents, basically, grammatically. God defined humanity as consisting of males and females and declared that he created humans from a male and a female and made them into peoples and tribes so that you may come to know one another. Again, so they're quoting this ayah. Great. But again, why quoting certain ayat and not others? Islam affirms that men and women are spiritually equal before God, even though each has different characteristics and roles. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam referred to women as equivalent counterparts of men, yet he explicitly condemned imitating the appearance of the opposite gender. Okay. Further, God calls on humanity to respect his wisdom in creation. And then Surah An-Nisa. They cite it, they don't quote it. I wonder why. So Surah An-Nisa, verse 119. Let's go to that. Oh, well, look at this. Quoting, Allah is citing the words of Shaitan. Shaitan is saying and swearing that I will lead them astray, humanity, and I will tempt them with false hopes and give them my order so they shall slit the ears of cattle, and I'll give them my order so they shall alter the creation of Allah. And whoever takes Shaitan as friend instead of Allah has incurred an obvious loss. Yeah, so maybe you don't want to cite this ayah, or you don't want to quote the ayah, because then it will seem that you're calling these people shaitani, satanic, which is what they are. It's what they are. Qawm Lut, Qawm Lut is shaitani. So again, they leave it up to the reader to go and find this ayah. They're not going to give it to you explicitly. I wonder why. As such, as a general rule, Islam strictly prohibits medical procedures intended to change the sex of healthy individuals, regardless of whether such procedures are termed gender affirming or confirming. For individuals born with biological ambiguities, such as disorders of sexual development, Islam permits them to seek medical care for corrective reasons. Yeah. So it's interesting wording. Like, this is just a small point, but as a general rule, Islam strictly prohibits medical procedures intended to change the sex of healthy individuals. Yeah, I guess you can call that a general rule, but I thought the general rule would be condemning imitation of the opposite gender. Like, that's the general rule. You don't imitate the opposite gender, and then more specifically, like, don't engage in these kinds of medical procedures. But they just have an inconsistent way of wording things. So you have to like read it carefully and make sure you're understanding. Okay. For individuals, okay, I read that part. Islam distinguishes between feelings, actions, and identity. God holds individuals accountable for their words and actions, not for their involuntary thoughts and feelings. As our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, God has pardoned Muslims for what they think, as long as they do not speak of or act on it. In Sahih Bukhari. So this is, when I read this, I was like, wait, is that what the hadith says? That sounds wrong. So I looked it up, and their translation is just bizarre. So this is the one way to translate it. So you can translate it as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, Allah has accepted my invocation to forgive what whispers in the heart of my followers unless they put it into action or utter it. So this is waswas or waswasa that comes into the heart or the sadr the chest. So it's like waswasa. But the way that they translate it, it doesn't give that impression. Like there's a difference between what you think, like consciously think, and waswasa. Um, yeah. So maybe like you're supposed to understand what they think as referring to the previous sentence, involuntary thoughts and feelings, which maybe you can gloss that as waswasa. So that's just a small thing. Like you can interpret it in that way. So not the biggest problem, but it just like caught my attention. I mean, one thing that is more problematic though about this whole concept of what they're implying here, they're not saying it, but they're implying is that, all of these um, intentions and these thoughts and feelings that have to do with, LGBT, are these all waswasa? Like, is that the cause of them? Like, if you have a certain person and he feels like he's in the wrong body, or he feels an attraction for the same sex, is that because of waswasa? Like, or is that how it started? Like, did it start as waswasa? Like, what is the cause of this? And the question that a lot of people have, not just like amongst Muslims, non-Muslims as well, is that, well, is God torturing people? Like, why is God torturing people? Like, he's giving them these thoughts and these desires, and then telling them that you cannot act on it. I'm more sympathetic to this kind of question. Before, I would answer this question by saying that, well, there are a lot of things that people desire. Like a person might desire to eat pork. A person might desire to drink alcohol. A person might desire to steal. A person might desire to, commit zina. And that can occur to a person, but you have to control it. And when it comes to these kinds of things, it's no different. It's no different when it comes to like same-sex attraction or gender identity stuff. It's no different. It's the same thing. But increasingly, I don't think that's satisfactory. I don't think that's a satisfactory response. I think there needs to be more said about what are actually the causes of these desires or these tendencies. And I think that needs to be elaborated. I mean, it's not difficult to find what the causes are. If you want to read about it, go to muslimskeptic.com. Go to muslimskeptic.com, go to my Telegram channel. It's actually very clear like what is going on. So a statement, I think, like a actual complete statement, not like this PR drivel from compassionate imams, that actual statement should include that information, or should at least hint to it, because there is this objection that, well, why is God tempting people with these kinds of feelings and thoughts? Well, actually, is it really God that's tempting them, or is this a product of a certain environment? Is it a product of certain kinds of factors, environmental factors? That's the question. And it's a question with a very clear answer. And we should be teaching that. So go to Muslim Skeptic and read our articles, go to all the resources that we put out. But I mean, you will get banned for talking about it on certain platforms. Okay. So you guys are still seeing my screen, right? Okay, great. In Islam, the sinful actions of an individual do not and should not dictate his or her identity. As such, it's impermissible for Muslims to take pride in identifying with labels that categorize them by their sins. Okay. So this first thing is incorrect. The sinful actions of an individual do not and should not dictate his or her identity. In Islam, actually, you can characterize people by their sins. Like you can characterize someone as a fasiq, or you characterize someone as ahlul bid'ah, mubtadi', like an innovator, for example, or a zindiq, as a deviant. Like these are we do we can dictate people's identities by the things that they publicly do, unapologetically do and promote. Like, of course. And even when it comes to musrifun, like transgressors, that's what Lut alayhi salam calls his people, like they're transgressors. So that is their identity. They have made it their identity, those sinful actions. So this is incorrect, or it's not sufficiently nuanced in making this distinction. And furthermore, like the Constitution that they're constantly talking about in this letter, the constitutional obligations and living with, coexisting peacefully, coexisting with who exactly? Coexisting with Qawm Lut, who, and elsewhere, you're constantly calling them LGBT proponents, LGBT community, LGBT minority. So you are talking about them as if that's their identity, right? So, but here in this sentence, you're denying that, we shouldn't identify people by sinful actions. There's a contradiction there. They're identifying entire groups like that. As such, it's impermissible for Muslims to take pride in identifying with labels that categorize them by their sins. So, I mean, this could be made so much more explicit. Like, it's impermissible for Muslims to take pride in identifying with labels. Like, is this supposed to be a pun? Like, to take pride in identifying with labels? Or is it impermissible for Muslims to use labels of this nature? Like, I'm a Muslim lesbian, for example, or I'm a Muslim bisexual. Are they saying it's haram to identify with such a label? Give us some examples. Like, what are you talking about? And is it impermissible to use, or you can use it, just don't take pride in it? Like, what do you mean? This is not a good statement for many, many reasons, but one of the more minor reasons is that its language is very poor. Like, it's very ambiguous and it's not precise. It lacks precision for something that is so sensitive. It lacks precision, and I think that's deliberate. I think it's deliberately lacking precision because in order to avoid politically incorrect statements. It's deliberately vague to avoid the other side pinning them down and saying, how dare you? We're liberal Muslims. How dare you say this? They want to avoid that backlash because those liberal Muslims have power. Those liberal Muslims are connected to the liberal institutions. They're connected to the government, like literally the US government. Like, I always bring up Dalia Mugahed, closely connected to Yasser Qadi and Omar Suleiman. Just the other week, like a few weeks ago, she was at the White House, rubbing shoulders with Biden, taking, glamour shots in the White House. And she's like the advisor for Yaqeen Institute. She's the advisor, or she's like a faculty member for Yasser Qadi's seminary. or visiting faculty. I don't know. So they're like 1 degree of separation or less from the White House, from like the Biden administration. So it's very serious. And Dalia Mugahed herself, many statements, like her institute, ISPU, many statements pro Qawm Lut. Like that's no question about that. But she's also a trusted advisor. Such a person, like such a shaitana, is also the trusted advisor for Yaqeen Institute and Yasser Qadi. So this is why they have to be deliberately vague and use this kind of coded language. Okay, it's important to note that the stance of Islam on illicit sexual relations goes hand in hand with its protection and promotion of the individual's right to privacy. Islam prohibits prying into others' private lives and discourages public disclosure of sexual behavior. See Surah Al-Hujurat and Surah Al-Nur. Very interesting. It just came to me right now. Islam prohibits prying into others' private lives. This is really great information for us to note, because aren't there these organizations that have been very active that do exactly this, prying into the private lives of respected imams and accusing them of spiritual abuse and secret, quote unquote, secret marriages? And very interesting. Islam prohibits prying into other people's lives, right? And discourages public disclosure of sexual behavior. Oh, it's discouraging. Okay, right. Because there's no had for accusing someone of zina publicly without proper witnesses, right? There's no had punishment for that. That's the had is just a discouragement. Right now, this, in light of compassionate imams and their attack on other imams, like I won't name any names because I don't want to distract from this, but again, go to muslimskeptic.com for all of the all of the details. But there are organizations. I will name the organizations. You have FACE, for example. FACE, also based in Dallas, also works with Omar Suleiman. You have groups like Horma, Ingrid Mattson's Horma. You have groups like In Sheikh's Clothing is another one. They're constantly like accusing respected imams of being predators. These predators, these monsters, these sexual deviants. So this statement is actually condemning that. So Omar Suleiman, you're signing and promoting this statement. How about you highlight this part of your own statement, Omar Suleiman? Put a star, highlight it, print it out, and put it on your desk. Like, you need to see this every day. Islam prohibits prying into other people's private lives. This is, write it in gold, Omar Suleiman. Right? Write it in gold for sure. And a lot of these other signatories as well. Write it in gold. Next time you start talking about, someone's private life and accusing them of quote unquote secret marriage, basically an imam has a second wife and, gets, or an imam is divorced for legitimate reasons. Oh, this is abuse. This is spiritual abuse. We need to like out this imam and like write a report and shame him. And, these compassionate imams working hand in hand with feminists who also happen to be LGBT activists to promote this kind of witch hunt, slander, qatf, Heart Women and Girls. That's another one of these organizations who has worked with some of these compassionate imam signatories. Yeah, I just realized what the implications of this statement. So continuing, we recognize that some religious groups have reinterpreted or revised religious doctrine to be inclusive of LGBTQ ideology. Yeah, like the signatories of this document. They, or this document itself. Like, you're constantly trying to be inclusive, right? You're saying peaceful coexistence. So that's the definition of it being inclusive. The Muslim community is not immune to such pressures. Indeed, some have attempted to reinterpret Islamic texts in favor of LGBTQ affirmation. We categorically reject such efforts as theologically indefensible because these aspects of sexual ethics fit within the category of immutable tenets and are therefore not subject to revision. So some have attempted to reinterpret Islamic texts in favor of LGBTQ affirmation. Do you mean like Jonathan Brown? Do you mean like Jonathan Brown, who is a signatory on this document? Where is he? Where is good old Johnny boy? Right here. Jonathan Brown, signatory. Are you referring to him? Are you referring to Yaqeen Institute? Are you referring to Yaqeen Institute that has tried to reinterpret Islamic texts to allow for affirmation? Like, that's exactly that's almost verbatim what Jonathan Brown has been saying and pushing. Affirmation. So, like, when you go, they have never retracted this article, by the way. Like, this pro Qawm Lut article, Yaqeen has never retracted it. They've taken it down. They've taken the article down, but they've never publicly, as far as I can tell, retracted it. And if you go to the website, like if you go to the link, here it is. Published 2017, updated 2022. So almost 5 years this article was up. And maybe you can still download it, actually. Maybe you can still download it. Jonathan Brown still has this paper up on his personal website, by the way. He hasn't taken it down. Yaqeen has taken it down, but they have not retracted it. Retraction is, we made a mistake. This was wrong. We apologize. It's not accurate. That's a retraction. In private, they're probably doing that because they can't be held accountable. But in public, they don't. They haven't retracted it as far as I can tell. Instead, you have this note that it's been archived. Are you guys seeing this? Is this clear? Like the text? They've archived it. So they haven't even taken it down. If you've archived something, that doesn't mean you've deleted it. Like, what does it mean that it's archived? Like, no one can access it. Like, this is the kind of word games that Yaqeen plays. So this was the update following a debate that took place at the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America in 2016 regarding how American Muslims could maintain their commitment to Islam's normative position on marriage and sexuality while also practically navigating the political challenges in the U.S. associated with defending Muslim safety and religious rights against rising Islamophobia. Wow, that's a long clause. Okay. So after all of that, after this debate that took place in 2016, Yaqeen Institute published a scholarly debate on the subject between Dr. Jonathan Brown and Dr. Shadi al-Masri. Dr. Brown, who had already published his views elsewhere, stridently upheld the orthodox Islamic sexual norms. Oh, man. Look at this revisionism. Jonathan Brown stridently upheld the orthodox Islamic sexual norms. Really? He did? So say, yeah, he did, because he said gay sex is haram. Yeah, he told Muslims to support gay marriage, and he told Muslims to affirm and advocate many LGBT rights, and even to go to rallies, pro-LGBT rallies. He said all that, but he was stridently upholding the orthodox Islamic sexual norms. What revision, like, subhanallah, like the deception of this stuff. following other leading American Muslim scholars. So it wasn't just Jonathan Brown. Jonathan Brown was following other leading American Muslim scholars. Who? Please tell us who he was following with his, ratio position. That's what he called it, the ratio position. Which other leading American Muslim scholar? You mean Yasser Qadi? You mean Yasser Qadi and Sherman Jackson? Were those the leading American Muslim scholars who also said that we can support Qawm Lut politically, but not morally? You can support it politically, but not morally. So was that what Jonathan Brown was following? So he advocated the path of political accommodation to secure reciprocal rights for Muslims as a religious minority. Oh, bravo, Dr. Brown. Thank you so much for advocating on behalf of Muslims, securing our reciprocal rights, because our rights were in such danger. You had to secure them by rubber stamping Qawm Lut and defending Qawm Lut and affirming and advocating many of their rights. Great job. Thank you so much. You're a hero. Now, given the subsequent cultural and political developments, Dr. Brown no longer holds this position. What position? What position does he no longer hold? All of it? All of it? Because you said that he upheld the Orthodox Islamic sexual norm. So he no longer holds that position. So what is he not holding anymore? He agrees that his earlier treatment of the subject has been rendered obsolete by Supreme Court rulings that entrench and enforce understandings of sexual and gender identity in law. So, see, this is what I was saying. They know that the Supreme Court is interpreting the Constitution to be pro-Qawm Lut. They know it, and they're saying that it's entrenched and enforced in the law. Doesn't that bring a new light to the fact that this statement is saying, this navigating differences statement is constantly telling Muslims that we're obligated to follow the Constitution? Isn't it like, don't you see this in a new light now? And how is it obsolete? Like his statement, how is his argument obsolete? His argument was that Muslims should affirm and advocate many LGBTQ rights because, that's what true secularism requires. True secularism requires the government to not be involved with defining marriage and morality, as Yasser Qadi put it. That was his argument. So he no longer accepts that argument. It's not clear. And it's not clear how that argument would be rendered obsolete by the Supreme Court. So this is pure nonsense. It's not a retraction. It's not a clarification. It's not even a deletion. They just say it's archived. So this is Yaqeen Institute playing games with people's iman. Like they can't say they made a mistake publicly about this in particular, because then who's gonna listen to them when they're publishing a whole new statement? They're publishing a whole new statement about Qawm Lut and how we have to peacefully exist in harmony with them. So, like, people who want to understand what Jonathan Brown and Yaqeen's position was, just go to Muslim Skeptic. Where is that article? Let me pull it up so that you have a reference. Yeah, just go to muslimskeptic.com. This article, search it in the search tab or the search box on the right, and it'll come right up. Okay, so then here are the quotes from the article. Muslims in the US should affirm and advocate for many, but not necessarily all, LGBTQ rights. Not because of quid pro quo, they stood by us, so we have to stand by them logic, but rather because Muslims in the US and LGBTQ groups seek protection for the same rights. Ironically, arguably have a common vision for the country's future. So yeah, this is amazing how such a statement could be published by a Islamic research institute. So, and other, very shocking statements. So I won't rehash all of it, but you can go and check it out if you forgot what Jonathan Brown has been saying or did say. We can't forget. Why? Because they're constantly trying to maintain this position of teaching Muslims how to understand this issue. They have no credibility. They should have no credibility with any Muslim, any Islamic institution, any imam, any scholar. The fact that they do is a scandal. The fact that these people are still called sheikh and imam and invited to speak, that's such a scandal. It's such a shame. So I know that you guys all agree with this as well, but unfortunately, people on the ground, there's a lot who are still confused. Okay, so let's continue. We categorically reject such efforts as theologically indefensible because these aspects of sexual ethics fit within the category of immutable tenets and therefore not subject to revision. So that concludes their morality section. They go into our constitutional right to hold our views section next. So this whole section was about Islam's position on sexuality and gender. They really haven't talked about any sexual ethics as far as I'm concerned. All they said is gay sex is haram. There are two genders. You're not necessarily liable for involuntary thoughts. You're only liable Islamically for your actions. That's all they've said. But that's not Islamic ethics regarding sexuality. There are many things that you will have missed. And this is why we read those ayat of the Quran. Because the morality and the ethics that come from the ayat of the Quran are far more expansive, far more severe, far more incisive than this, nonsense that they're pushing as some kind of hardcore statement. So what kind of ethics do we get when we read the Quran? Well, number one message that we get is that sexual immorality destroys people. Sexual immorality is destructive of people, and it actually destroys society, and it causes this kind of decay in society itself, but also it brings punishment from Allah. It brings this kind of adhab. That is a huge message in the Quran, and that is a big part of Islamic sexual ethics. But this is something that's seen as offensive, immoral by liberals and the left wing. Especially the idea that people would be punished for engaging in sexual freedom. God is going to punish that. How backwards and barbaric. And you see like Christian the televangelists will say something like, oh, well, that earthquake or that hurricane, that's because of the immorality of society, the sexual immorality. And you have all these liberals who will laugh and say, oh, these stupid televangelists, they think that somehow what people do in their bedrooms affects the weather. And they'll mock the Bible. They will mock religion. But this is actually an Islamic concept as well, because this is reality. The punishment of Allah can come at any moment. It can come from above or it can come from below. It can be through weather. It could be through earthquakes. It could be through even angels, malaika, that will come to destroy. So the punishment can come, and it is tied directly to our behaviors and what we find acceptable. So this is a big, huge part of Islamic sexual ethics and our understanding of the universe. But do you see these people talking about that or even mentioning it? They won't even quote the verses of the Quran that clearly state this. So that's one thing. Okay. Number two, those who openly engage in fahisha, they are a uniquely evil force. Okay. And part of the reason why is they want to force their fahisha on everyone. Again, that was clear from the ayat of the Quran that we just read. They want to force everyone to accept and to participate even in their fahisha. So this is something that is very clear, part of Islamic sexual ethics. It's a part of Quranic sexual ethics. Number three, liwat, right? This sexual act between the same sex is not like any other sin in Islam. This is considered to be one of the worst, one of the most egregious sins. And it's not tolerated anywhere in the Sharia, in Islamic law. It's not tolerated from Muslims or non-Muslims. So shirk actually and kufr can be tolerated because you have, the concept of ahlul dhimma or ahlul kitab who are dhimmis. They can engage in their beliefs and their practices with conditions. So that is the Sharia tolerating non-Muslims engaging in their shirk and their kufr. They just pay jizya and they have to abide by, that status of being ahlul dhimma. But these behaviors, like fahisha, like this kind of sexual behavior, is not tolerated at all, whether by Muslims or non-Muslims. This is a part of the sexual ethics of Islam. 4, we do not associate people of desires. We do not associate with these people of desires or the people who are pushing this fahisha. We do not associate with them. We do not ally with them. We do not work with them. We view them as musrifun, as transgressors, as the Quran says in multiple occasions. So that's also a very important part of Islamic sexual ethics. And also condemning them is necessary. There needs to be a moral condemnation of those individuals. Not condemning them is dangerous for dunya and akhirah. Why? Because again, there's punishment that will come. If you don't condemn, you will be punished along with them. And this is what, again, all of these ethics are found in the ayat that we read, right? Because the wife of Lut alayhi salam was punished. Why? She did not condemn them. She condoned them. So she was included with them, even though she herself was not involved in that kind of fahisha. So this is an important part of the sexual ethics of Islam. Did you see any condemnation in this document, like any inkar so far of these people, of modern day Qawm Lut? Was there any inkar? No. There's just, we exist peacefully with them. We want to coexist peacefully with them. And then fifth, we do not support people's right to engage in fahisha. Again, go back to Lut alayhi salam in the Quran. Did Lut say, I respect your right, I affirm, or I acknowledge your constitutional right to practice, this behavior? Did Lut alayhi salam say that? Like this document is saying? No. So we do not see anything like that. So we cannot support anyone's supposed right to engage in fahisha, and to engage in this kind of iniquity, this enormity. So these are just 5 ethical principles from the Quran, just related to the 2 or 3 ayat that we read about Lut alayhi salam. Is any of this found in the document? Like, a lot of people will criticize this document. I've seen people criticize this document, and they'll say, oh, well, it says Islamic morality. It gives the Islamic moral position, but it just ignores the political issues. It ignores like the political side of the equation. I've made this point before. You can't really separate morality from politics. Politics is inherently a moral enterprise. That's number 1. But number 2, this document doesn't even get the morality right. it does not properly convey Islamic sexual ethics. It distorts sexual ethics by omission. It distorts Islamic sexual ethics in the tenor of how it is discussing the issue. It distorts the issue by making it into this kind of very dry, almost neutral type of statement, like as if, again, like gay sex is haram. Okay, you can state that as if you're describing some position in fiqh, like, okay, it's haram. Okay, we know that. But when we read the Quran, it's condemnation. There is very emotional language that's used. There's very vivid language that's used that gives you the kind of orientation that you as a believer have to have on this issue. All of that is stripped from this kind of PR statement, cooked up in maybe some PR firm. All of that is stripped. All of that morality, all of the ethics of this issue has been stripped in this document. This is why this document is an abject failure, and it also is orienting Muslims to have this kind of PC attitude towards the subject, because having the correct position on Qawm Lut is not just as an abstract matter thinking gay sex is haram. That is not, like, you do not have the correct moral attitude or the moral position. If that's all that you think, yeah, that's one part of it. That's one arguably small part of it. The bigger part, arguably, is the character of Qawm Lut and what they try to do and how they view purity, how they are trying to force themselves onto others. This is a huge part of the morality that you have to understand. And if you are a believer, you are going to react in the way that Lut alayhi salam reacts. Lut is denouncing them. He is doing inkar. He is saying that you are hated. You are among, I am of those who despise. I am of those who despise what you're doing, hate what you're doing. Like, that's the kind of attitude that Lut alayhi salam has. None of that is quoted in this kind of document that supposedly is representing Islamic sexual ethics. Please, don't insult our intelligence. Don't insult us, Yasser Qadi and Omar Suleiman, with this whitewashed nonsense PR statement that's good for just yourselves. It's not good for anyone other than yourselves. You are distorting Islam. This is why I call you deviants. Okay, so our constitutional right to hold our views. Okay, we're getting almost to the end. We recognize that our moral code conflicts with the goals of LGBTQ proponents. How quaint. Again, we recognize our moral code conflicts. There's a moral code conflict here. We also acknowledge their constitutional right to live in peace and free from abuse. Again, so they keep saying constitutional right, constitutional right. This is deliberate. I've explained to you why it's deliberate. We acknowledge your constitutional right to live in peace and free from abuse. Like, they're defining what it means to live in peace. It means don't discriminate against us. Allow us to, use whatever bathroom that we want. Use our pronouns. Let us teach your children. Let us come into your libraries with our books. Let us, bake our cakes, basically. Bake our cakes. Do not discriminate against us in your Islamic schools. This is what they define as living in peace, and they're interpreting the Constitution, like their constitutional rights, in this way. So if you sign this statement, you are 100% in favor of LGBT rights. Why? Because the Constitution is in favor of LGBT rights. Do you get it? Nevertheless, we emphasize our God-given and constitutional right to hold, live by, and promote our religious beliefs in the best manner. Okay. So this is a hilarious kind of statement to make. And Emphasizing to whom? We emphasize our God-given rights. Like, who are you emphasizing? So there's this like massive governmental power, okay, that's forcing all of these expansion of these rights, pushing it onto every aspect of society. Governments are pushing this into all the schools. And then we want to emphasize our God-given and constitutional rights to live by and promote our beliefs in the best manner. Like, is this a negotiation? Like, this is a complete idiotic way to understand the situation. Like, the situation is not this kind of negotiation like the US government or all of these powerful institutions are waiting for Yasser Qadi and, you know, Omar Suleiman to extend an olive branch. Like, okay, we respect your constitutional rights. Please respect our constitutional rights. Like, they don't like, do they not understand the reality? Like, what is happening with this topic? Like, what Qawm Lut is actually doing? You know, they seem to have this kind of understanding from 15 years ago or from 10 years ago, maybe even, where, you know, Qawm Lut was just saying, oh, we just want to do things in the privacy of our own bedroom, and just let us have the right, you know, to do what we want in the privacy of our bedroom, our own bedrooms. Just live and let live. We won't bother anyone. And then Yasser Qadi and Omar Suleiman are saying, okay, fine, you know, we'll let you do whatever you want. We'll respect your constitutional rights to do what you want in your bedroom, but allow us to do what we want, and teaching our children, you know, in our masajid and in our Islamic schools. Like, that's not the situation. The situation is this massive program to push this agenda and to reorganize society, to re-engineer society. And this is explicit, you know, the LGBT activists are explicit about, you know, their goals. Like, they want to destroy certain institutions that are deemed to be genocidal, even to be heteronormative, genocidal, to be, what's the word I'm looking for? These institutions that are bigoted and discriminatory, homophobic. You have to destroy family, you have to destroy marriage, and recast it in a queer positive way. Basically, that's what their whole message is. That's what they want to do. It's a massive social reengineering program. This is explicitly what they say, and they want to reform religion. You know, Islam is homophobic right now. That's why we want liberal Islam. That's why we want to reform Islam. These imams are not, you know, compassionate enough. They need to be more compassionate and accept Qawm Lut. So we have to reform religion, religious leadership. This is what is really happening, very aggressively taking place. And the way that these people are talking, these compassionate imams are talking in this statement, is like they're living on a different planet. They're extending an olive branch. Okay, you know, we'll let you do what you want in the privacy of your own bedroom. Like, we're way past that, buddy. We're way past that. So, as if like the Muslim community has any power to, you know, protest this in a way that like we can set terms, like we can dictate terms to them. Okay, it's a quid pro quo. We'll accept your constitutional rights. You acknowledge our constitutional rights, please. It's only fair. Be a gentleman about it. Be a gentleman and accept our constitutional rights, just like we accept your constitutional rights. Like, it's like someone is punching you in the face. Imagine, like, someone is just punching you in the face constantly, and your response is, you know, just because I don't agree with you, doesn't mean we can't live peacefully. Like, I want to live peacefully. Like, just because I disagree with you punching me in the face doesn't mean we can't live peacefully. And the guy is just like wailing, turning you into a pulp. This is like the situation. Like, this is what this statement reminds me of. Okay, so next sentence. Peaceful coexistence does not necessitate agreement, acceptance, affirmation, promotion, or celebration. Very interesting. So again, they keep saying peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. Coexistence does not necessitate agreement, acceptance, affirmation, promotion, or celebration. Very interesting word choice, because you were saying, Yaqeen Institute and Jonathan Brown were saying that we should affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. So that's affirmation right there. That's advocacy is promotion, and arguably could be celebration, right? Agreement, you have agreed. You agree to their constitutional rights. You've accepted their constitutional rights. So this is a contradiction in their own statement. They're saying peaceful coexistence does not necessitate agreement or acceptance. You just said that you accept their constitutional rights. So you have made that acceptance. So affirmation, promotion, and celebration on previous occasions, you have said that there's nothing un-Islamic about it. There's nothing un-Islamic about what Jonathan Brown said, what Yaqeen Institute published. There was nothing un-Islamic about that. Yasser Qadi many times defended the same idea, the idea that we can promote, we can affirm many of their rights, these Qawm Lut rights. So they haven't retracted any of that. They haven't. So as far as we're concerned, they still believe that. So I mean, this is what is interesting about this, because they don't make a strong statement and say that Muslims do not affirm, and we should not promote, and we should not celebrate. They don't make a strong statement like that. They say it's not necessary. Our peaceful coexistence is not necessarily predicated on affirmation or promotion or celebration. Just because we're not affirming you, with, I don't know, how would you affirm them other than what you're already doing, which is to say that we accept all of your constitutional rights as defined by this secular constitution, this pro-LGBT constitution. How else could you affirm them? Like having a party? Like, are you gonna have a pride parade in the masjid or something? Like, what else what else could you do more than what you're already doing? So very weird. Instead of a strong statement condemning anyone who would affirm or promote or accept or agree, they say we don't have to do those things and still be peaceful. We can still be friends. We can still be buddies. We can still go on that, march together, that migrant march, and do some, pagan rituals together, pour some libations together. We can still do that. Peacefully do that together. Stand up to bad orange man together. We can still do that without me literally having to go to a pride parade. That's basically what they're saying. We refuse. Wait, hold on. Yeah. So this statement does not negate, nothing in here negates the Yaqeen statement, the Jonathan Brown statement. That's why probably Jonathan Brown had no problem signing on to this and being a signatory. We refuse the false choice between succumbing to social pressures to adopt views contrary to our beliefs or facing unfounded charges of bigotry. So again, it's not social pressure. This is governmental pressure. That's the source. And again, look at the PR language. Adopt views contrary to our beliefs. They can't even make a strong statement like say, false views, morally incorrect views, ethically problematic views. They can't even say that. That's not peaceful. That's not coexistence. They can't make a categorical. This is why I'm saying there's no inkar. There's no condemnation. Even here, like, we should don't make us adopt views that are contrary to our beliefs, master, please. Like, this is just pure humiliation after humiliate. Every single sentence, almost every single sentence, other than the ayat of the Quran, of course, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, but almost every single statement in this document is dripping with humiliation and submission, concession. How could anyone sign on to this? How could any Muslim sign on to this? No, I'm not doing takfir on anyone. Please do not interpret, this kind of statement. I'm just saying that a Muslim who understands, like, and reads carefully, how could you sign on to this? Okay, almost at the end. We call on policymakers to protect our constitutional right to practice our religious beliefs freely without fear of harassment and to oppose any legislation seeking to stifle religious freedom of faith communities. Oh, wait, did I miss the sentence? Oh, I missed this amazing sentence. Such coercive ultimatums undermine prospects for harmonious coexistence. We want to be buddies. Harmonious coexistence with Qawm Lut, guys. We can hug and have fun together, go on picnics. Harmonious coexistence. Don't undermine the prospects, guys. The prospects. We'll have so much fun. If only you just be nicer. Let us have our constitutional rights. We gave you your constitutional rights. We acknowledge them. We acknowledge your constitutional rights. Guys, come on. Don't undermine our prospects for fun. We do so much together. Just imagine, like, that's what these compassionate imams are saying. This is what they're saying. Yeah, so then this statement, call on policymakers to protect our constitutional right. Oh, so now you want to call on policymakers. Oh, okay, now we should call on policymakers. What about for the past 10 years? Oh, when Yasser Qadi told us not to get involved and that, more of their rights means more rights for us. All of those statements that we documented in Dark Legacy. Now we have to talk about policymakers. Contact your senator. We have to get involved politically. We have to get involved with every other issue. We have to protest migrants. We have to protest, whatever feminist cause. We have to protest reproductive rights. Like all of these compassionate imams do. They go and protest on Washington, D.C., and they even get arrested. You can find pictures of Omar Suleiman in handcuffs in the Capitol. He is protesting the mistreatment of immigrants and migrants. Brave stance. Protesting the government. But he can't protest anything else, I guess, on the basis of Islamic values. Not on this issue, at least. That might undermine prospects for harmonious coexistence. But now, now we have to call on policymakers to protect our constitutional right. I guess things got too real, huh? I guess ignoring the issue. I guess Yasser Qadi was pretty wrong, huh? When he said that, this is not, such an important issue. Muslims don't need to get involved. He even said, like, yeah, if Muslims want to support LGBT rights, that's a political issue. It's not a moral issue. And even to this day, he says that we have to support these pro-LGBT politicians. That's his stance. So where's actually, that's a good question. Where is he calling on policymakers to protect our constitutional right? Is he calling on Ilhan Omar? Where these politicians that are supposedly Muslims, like, are you calling on them? Consistent with our claim of nonpartisanship, we are committed to working with individuals of all religious and political affiliations to protect the constitutional right of faith communities to live according to their religious convictions and to uphold justice for all. Okay. Again, constitutional right. How many times in this document? I think it was like 6 or 7. Now, to our Muslim community, this is the last part, I think. We urge Muslim public figures to uphold the sanctity of our faith and refrain from making erroneous pronouncements on behalf of Islam. So when I read this, I laughed out loud. Like the audacity of these people, the audacity for them, of all people, to tell others not to make erroneous pronouncements on behalf of Islam. The people who are signed on to this statement, the amount of erroneous batil that they have spewed, and now they have the audacity to tell others, don't speak on behalf of Islam. Like, it's shocking. But, I think this is actually directed to Muslim politicians. I think when they say public figures, they're referring to like politicians. But again, it's like ambiguous, not clear. Like, I guess it would be too spicy. It would be too controversial if they actually said, we urge Muslim politicians, Muslim government officials. Okay. And it's also, they're saying our Muslim community. So you think of like, okay, Muslims in the community, like the Imam, du'at, like speakers, khatibs, like that's the kind of impression you get from the heading. But I think they are referring to politicians. So we reject any attempt to attribute positions to Islam concerning sexual and gender ethics that contravene well-established Islamic teachings. Okay, so if you reject any attempt, that means you reject, your whole dawah. All of this compassionate imam dawah, they have to reject it. Also, it's funny, you reject any attempt to attribute positions to Islam concerning sexual and gender ethics, but notice how they don't make the stronger, correct statement that we will repudiate such Muslim public figures. We will repudiate them and condemn them for trying to attribute positions to Islam. That's the correct statement, but they're not going to say that because that means they would have to condemn Ilhan Omar. They would have to condemn Sadiq Khan in London. They would have to condemn Hamza Yusuf in Scotland. So they just reject the attempt. So do you see how, the nuance here that they're using to shield all of their cherished positions? To be clear, we cannot overstate the detrimental spiritual consequences for those who intentionally advocate the rejection of, or misinterpret the will of God, as in doing so, they endanger their status as believers. Yeah, so it's spiritual consequences. What about consequences for society? Like, what about consequences for the human race? Okay, how about telling these public figures, hey, we don't support you. We're going to stop supporting you. We're going to condemn you. We're definitely not going to associate with you. We're not going to invite you to our Islamic conferences. How about saying something like that? But of course, they don't say that. To those among us who struggle with desires that fall outside the boundary set by God, know that even the most righteous can commit sins and that every Muslim, no matter how sinful, has the potential to be forgiven. So very compassionate. Again, I don't know why this is right after the statement about public figures. It seems like it's just a awkward switch in topic. Practicing self-restraint and devotion to God is considered heroic. Oh, okay. Heroes. These heroes that are practicing self-restraint. Its spiritual reward increases proportionally with the level of struggle involved. Our ultimate purpose is to prioritize devotion to God over our desires and not sacrifice our faith. We pray to God to grant us the necessary strength and unwavering commitment to live up to our ideals. May we find inner peace and satisfaction through loving submission. Like, this is also what, like, you're describing the submission to Allah as this loving submission. If you just say submission to Allah, that's too harsh. That's too coercive. Like, oh, you're submitting to Allah. No, it's loving submission. I'm not denying that love is a part of our relationship with Allah. It definitely is. But fear of Allah is also part of our relationship with Allah. Fear, abject submission, lowering ourselves. We are slaves to Allah. We are nothing. Allah can destroy us. We are His slaves. This is what it means to submit to Allah, to understanding how high Allah is above us. He is our creator. He is our master. He owns us. He can do with us whatever He wants. He just says be and it is. This is the kind of, you don't see, this is the the grand nature of Allah, His superiority, Azza wa Jal. Like that's different than the attributes of Allah and the names of Allah that have to do with mercy and love, that have to do with His forgiveness. These kinds of names of Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Ar-Razaq, Al-Wadud, those names of Allah, those characteristics. And then there's other aspects, Al-Jabbar, right? Al-Mutakabbir, right? These names of Allah. So, but they're trying to, like, both are needed. You need both the hope and the love, and you also need the fear and the reverence of Allah. You need both. That's healthy iman, requires both. But they're like mixing things, like loving submission. Like, you can't just say submission to Allah. You have to say the loving submission. Even at the beginning, what was it they're saying? The loving, we submit to God completely, voluntarily, and lovingly. Like, they're just mixing. Like, this is, I know what the DH haters are going to say. Oh, Daniel condemns love. Daniel condemns love. Daniel doesn't think that we should love Allah. He said it on stream, guys. I heard it. Daniel is ridiculous. So you're gonna see tweets about that. They got me. I've been exposed. I'm trying to make like a important point, and this is how you. Anyway. Okay, so we reached the end of the statement. Oh, we didn't see the signatories. That's worth looking. Let's look at the signatories. So right at the top, Tamim Ahmadi, Hatem Al-Hajj, Tom Fachin of Yaqeen Institute, Jihad Safir, Bayan graduate. You guys know about Bayan, right? Yasser Fahmi. So there are names here that are the usual suspects. Owaymir Anjum, like the Yaqeen editor. Okay. Al-Maghrib Institute, Yaqeen Institute, Omar Sulaiman, obviously. A lot of the usual suspects, like Navaid, Al-Maghrib guy. Okay. Muzammil Siddiqui, Abdul Nasser Jangda, Qalam Institute. If you saw our video on free mixing recently, like, these are known people. They're associated. It's the Dawah Mafia. I think some of the people genuinely here, like, they didn't know what they were signing onto. Like, they just signed it on the basis of being assured. Like, they just trust an advisor, and the advisor is a fanboy of compassionate Imams, and the advisor told them, yeah, sign it. This is nothing wrong. Look, they're citing ayat of the Quran. Of course, this is a great statement. So I'm not necessarily saying that everyone who signed this should be condemned, but many of them should. Many of, like, the usual suspects, like Sohaib Webb, like, how many years of advocacy he's been, talking about defending LGBT rights. I don't see him retracting any of those statements. So yeah, Yasser Qadi down here, as if he wasn't like one of the main people who was orchestrating this whole project. So yeah, Shanawi of Yaqeen Institute. So yeah, it's not like someone like Shinawi, I absolutely blame, for everything he does to defend and to whitewash Yaqeen Institute. Like I condemn Shinawi in strong terms. Um, he's just like these others. Yeah. Oh, Red Kufi guy, you guys might know about him. Jonathan Brown, like some people I just told, like all I had to say, like, you want to sign this document on Qawm Lut? Do you know that Jonathan Brown has signed it? And that was enough to convince them. Like, obviously, I'm not going to sign something not signed by that guy. Like, after everything he said, like, say no more. Say no more. We got it. But yeah, everyone should have that kind of mindset. Like, who's promoting? Like, the people who are promoting this statement are the people who have had the worst track record on this issue. So why would anyone follow them? Like, why would you continue to follow them on this of all issues? Like, of this of all issues, you're gonna follow them and sign on to their statement. So that's why I don't have as much husn van, let's say, for these signatories, because how many times are you gonna get stung from the same hole? How many times are you going to allow these people to debase you and ruin your good name? Like you attached your name to this garbage. Like, does anyone disagree? Like, after I've gone through nearly 3 hours, line by line explanation, does anyone have any doubt that this is pure garbage? That this is just a pro Qawm Lut statement, like acknowledging their constitutional rights over and over and over again. This is basically, I don't support gay marriage. I just support the right of gay people to get married. That's what this is. That's exactly what this is. So who has any doubts about this? And most of you, alhamdulillah, even before this stream, like, it was obvious. Like, I was getting emails actually from brothers, and they're saying, Daniel, we had an imam who wanted to sign on to the statement. He consulted with us and we read the statement. We kept in mind your pointers about reading carefully. And it has this problem, it has this problem, it has this problem. People, like, they know the game now. Like, you can't pull a fast one anymore. Can't pull a fast one on us, Omar Suleiman. We know, like, your tricks. we know the games you're playing. And yeah, alhamdulillah. So I'm very proud of the Muslim community. What this document serves, though, is you get a clear idea of the Dawah Mafia, the people who are firmly in the Dawah Mafia, and those who have been compromised by the Dawah Mafia. Like, I would not trust anyone. I wouldn't fully trust anyone who has signed on to this statement. That's the unfortunate reality. I can't trust them. Like, how do they not know? Like, how do they? This is not new news. Like, but they are saying they're working on this statement for weeks. Like, imagine you're working on this statement for weeks to just say that gay sex is haram. Like, it took weeks for us it took us weeks to say that our morality is based on the Quran. It took us weeks to craft that statement. As if they're like making this is such a deep and it's sophisticated, and it's such a, what's the word? This is such a involved, and this is such a, what's the word? Like, carefully crafted, like really navigating complex issues, like deep into the fiqh, so deep into the Islamic sciences and the ulum. We had to really bust out the books of tafasir and usul al-fiqh and nahu and sarf, and we had to pour over text after text, researching nonstop. We were really burning the midnight oil to produce this statement that gay sex is haram and there are two genders. So they're so proud of it. They're so proud of, groundbreaking statement. Yeah, that's actually what a bunch of them said, right? our groundbreaking statements. We've really broken new ground here, guys. They have to say that. They have to say it as if this is something new, so that they can justify. They say, see, this is the new stuff. Don't look at anything before. Don't look at our long track record before and all of our nonsense before. That's old. This is the new groundbreaking stuff. Fresh, hot off the presses. Hot off the presses. We poured over this for weeks. Unprecedented, groundbreaking. So, okay, troll. Maybe you should rewrite it. I just did rewrite it line by line. I did rewrite it. And that's what the critique is to say how it's wrong and what is the correct alternative. That's what I just did for 3 hours. Did you miss it? But here, I'll rewrite it very simply. Here, Muslims, you want a statement for your community on LGBT? All you got to do is go to Surah Al-A'raf, verses 80 through 83. Print them out. Print them out. Print it in gold, these ayat, and sign underneath it. Sign underneath it as a humble slave of Allah, that we submit to these ayat of Allah. This is our statement. That's all you have to do. If you're so confused, oh, well, how are we going to address Qawm Lut? How? What kind of statement? It's just so difficult. It's so difficult to talk about this. Oh, we're just conflicted. We have to draft. We have to spend weeks drafting and debating what kind of statement can we make. And then at the end of that, after how many years? Like, it's 2023, and the most that these guys can produce is still gay sex is haram. Like, that's the most that they can say. There are two genders. That's the most that they can say. That's the level of discourse. In 2023, how long have we been dealing with this issue? How long has there been this, as they call it, social pressure? And this is all that they can say, like their groundbreaking statement. So if this, it is so vexing, like, as for you guys, it is so vexing to make a statement about Qawm Lut. Here, I'll make it very simple for you. Just go to the Quran, Surah Al-A'raf, verse 80 through 83. Print this in gold letters. This is our statement. It says everything. Or maybe we'll go to Surah An-Naml. Print these, okay? Verses 55 through 58. Just print, and sign it. There you go. Khalas. So simple, right? It doesn't require headache. It doesn't require vexing, this tortured, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to say? Oh, they're going to come for us. Come on, guys. Come on. It's not that complicated. If you just print the statement and you read it and you understand it, go to the tafsir of it. Go to the tafsir and see what the scholars have said. See what the sunnah of Lut alayhi salam actually is. Be like Lut, okay? You want a statement? You want a statement on LGBT? Look at what Lut says, alayhi salam. Everything that Lut alayhi salam, the prophet, says in the Quran, repeat it. That is your statement on LGBT. Khalas, done. Finished. No, nothing else is needed. Nothing else is needed. Okay? If you want to elaborate, go to Ibn Kathir, for example. Go to Qurtubi. Go to Tafsir Jalalain. Go to one of these tafsir and you can have some elaboration. They'll explain exactly what was happening, what Lut alayhi salam was saying. There's your statement. Khalas, finished, done. So stop asking these questions. So let me go to super chats. Did you guys send super chats? I have to pull it up. So if you want me to read a comment, just go to muslimskeptic.com, donation, go to the contribution tab, and then there's enter some amount, and then there's a message section. And in that message section, you can put a comment and I'll read it. So, Assalamu alaikum, brother. To shield our children from all this degeneracy, we can consider homeschooling. But I've been told that children can grow up socially inept. What can we do about that? Also, have you considered starting a homeschooling program or online school from pre-K to junior high? Okay, I'm so glad you asked. This is false. Like homeschooling will not socially stunt your children. Children who are homeschooled are actually more socially well adjusted than children who go to schools. Why this is because when you are homeschooled, you interact with your parents more. You interact with other adults more, like other family members, and your siblings of other age groups. You interact with them more. You have more responsibility. You socialize. You go to the masjid with other children. You go on field trips with other families, like homeschooling co-ops. And children are much better socialized. Public school, your child is just going to be with his same grade level, his same age. There's less interaction with adults. There's less socialization with adults. So actually, children can be greatly socially stunted through public schools because your child is basically sitting in a class listening to a teacher. He may or may not speak at all in an entire 8-hour period. I remember in school, like I could go 8 hours and not say a single word. I'm just sitting in class. But that's very unlikely in homeschool because there's your parent and child, there's constant interaction. So this is an absolute myth. Homeschooling does not socially stunt your children. The exact opposite. Homeschooling children are more socially fluid and capable. And if you are truly worried about that, just make sure to get with other families, like other like-minded families who have the same ideology, understanding of Islam, understanding of the dangers of wider society. Get together. They exist in every part of the world. Alhamdulillah. If you're in any kind of city, you will find other Muslims who are like-minded, and you can get together and you can do homeschooling together or social functions, field trips. It's very easy and it's very fun. As for programs, we have a program, Alesta Institute. We have a homeschooling curriculum, and here it is. Alesta Institute. If you're not subscribed to Alesta and not a student of ours, why not? If you like this kind of content, if you like this kind of deep dive, you like analysis, you like to learn in this kind of systematic way, enroll, become a student of Alesta. We already have thousands who are enrolled. Be a part of it. And there's so much content there that you will appreciate, inshallah. But look, our homeschooling tab right here in the top right. And we have, this curriculum, the description. You can download a sample. We have different levels. You can see what the curriculum is about. So it's not a homeschooling program in the sense that we don't teach your children, but we empower the parent to teach and to homeschool children on the basis of Quran, what we call Quranic homeschool. And there are families around the world who are using our curriculum. And there are even Islamic schools who are using our curriculum. There are Islamic schools who want to use Alesta's homeschooling curriculum, but they use it for their Islamic school or for their Sunday school, for example. So they use it as a supplement. So some parents, they send their kids to school, but they want an extra Islamic supplement. They use our curriculum. So that's your answer to your question. Super chat from brother Mortaza or Mortaza. Keep upholding haqq no matter what, even if the world turns upside down. May Allah reward you immensely for doing great work. Jazakallah khairah for your super chat. Yeah. So, yeah. Any other comments? Muslim Ninja, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for your comment. So yeah, I didn't see any Yasser Qadi or Omar Suleiman or Jonathan Brown. Why not? Like, can't we have a civil discussion? Can't we have a civil back and forth engagement? No, I'm serious. Like, I would give them an opportunity to speak and defend their position, give their perspective. I would have questions. I would have questions for them, but they would have the opportunity to at least give their side of the story. So let it never be said that I did not give them an opportunity to give their side of the story. This is not even the first time that I'm inviting them to explain themselves. I'm not afraid to have them sit and explain this terrible, terrible statement. Okay, here's another super chat. Assalamu alaikum, brother. There are a lot of atheist channels that have been attacking religion lately, such as blah, blah, blah. I don't want to say the names of the channels. I wanted to make others aware of them, and we need to call them out and warn others. Yeah, I'm not going to promote them by naming the channels, but yeah, I agree. They're atheist channels, but I find their critiques are getting less and less compelling. All of their issues have been addressed already 10 times over by all kinds of Muslim channels. You have all kinds of Muslim channels, like big ones like Brother Muhammad Hijab. You have channels like Dawah Wise, brothers in the UK, for example. You have brothers like Ijaz. You have brothers like Jake the Muslim Metaphysician. You have Thought Adventure Podcast. You have Fareed Responds. You have all of these Muslim channels. Sorry if I didn't mention the many that exist off the top of my head, but they're doing great work responding to all this nonsense. In fact, I think that these atheist channels are just dying out. Like, as far as their criticisms of Muslims and Islam, like, they're on the back foot. Muslims are doing our jobs, refuting all of their very weak arguments. Yeah, Adnan Rashid is another one. Yeah. Sabur Ahmed, yeah, another one. Good brother. Mufti Yasser, obviously, of course. These are the channels that we're going to promote. Quran and Bible blog, I believe. All of these are doing a good job, mashallah. So let's see. Anything else? Any questions? Oh, Bro Haji, of course, Bro Haji. Yeah, he's doing a lot of good content lately, mashallah. Calling out the compassionate Imams. Can I debate a liberal atheist on homosexuality? Maybe, inshallah. It's already been debated essentially in my previous debates because it keeps coming up. Like, they ask in the Q&A, or like when I debated Destiny, it'd be good to have a debate dedicated to that subject in particular. But it'd also be hard to have it online because, it just gets constantly reported. Like, this kind of content. So Can you respond to tweets by Jonathan Brown and Nathan? What did those tweets say? Yeah, here's the question that you always get, like, is there any good in Yaqeen at all? Like, is there any good in Yasser Qadi and Omar Sulaiman at all? You are just completely discrediting their entire body of work. And the answer to that is yes. That is exactly what I'm doing. That's exactly my goal, is to completely discredit them. Yes, you got it. So why? Why though? Because they have proven themselves to be unfit. They have proven themselves to be untrustworthy. They have proven themselves to deliberately mislead the community, even when they're corrected over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. They insist on putting out the same nonsense, the same deception. This is deliberate. So that tells you who they are and what their agenda really is. And sometimes they're explicit. Like I said, Yasser Qadi says explicitly he's a reformist. He wants to reform Islam. So when they have discredited themselves, why would I promote them? Why would I say, oh, they have a lot of good? Okay, yeah, that goes without saying. No person is 100% evil. Like, no person is 100%, especially a Muslim, because contrary to what they claim and what they say, I've never takfired them. I have never said they're not Muslims. So a Muslim always has good by virtue of Iman. But should that person be a religious authority or be considered a religious leader or a religious teacher? No, because a person who lies or deceives or misrepresents Islam or hides aspects of the religion and deliberately doesn't teach certain aspects of the religion in this very deliberate way, they are discredited from a teacher, because the lay person, like the 99% of their audience, can't even tell the difference between the good and the bad. Prior to Muslim Skeptic really pushing against Yaqeen Institute, people not known, right? There's a Yaqeen Institute is great. They have this great article on Qawm Lut rights. They have this great article by Jonathan Brown. Oh, beautiful. They have this beautiful article, amazing, on human evolution. They have this amazing article about Islamic liberalism. They have this wonderful article. Like, all of this batil, sometimes even kufr, that they were publishing, that they have been publishing. You just think, oh, well, they're good, right? So the 99% of their followers are not going to be able to distinguish necessarily what is the good and what is the bad. So when someone has been engaged in promoting batil and deception and misguidance repeatedly, track record, all there with video evidence in 4K, then you can't trust them to teach anymore. You can't trust them because you don't know if what they're telling you is haqq or it's batil. Interesting person. Let me see if I can share some interesting screenshots with you. How will I present this? The one interesting person that shared the this navigating differences statement is, what's his name? Oh, that's way too small. Can you see that? Oh, this guy Muhammad Fadl. So he says, important statement by North American Muslim leaders on questions of sexual identity and religious freedom in the U.S. And look at the part he quotes. Interesting. It's interesting because Muhammad Fadl is on the board of Muslim Advocates, and Muslim Advocates is like a huge, like what's the right word for it? They're very passionately pro LGBT. They are like in the Supreme Court cases, they're like advocating with the LGBT side. They're fighting against the Christian baker, for example. Like that's how pro LGBT they are. And Muhammad Fadl is on their board. And if you watched, you might recognize Muhammad Fadl from the Bayan video. So our recent video on the channel on Bayan Islamic Seminary. Muhammad Fadl is one of their instructors. And he also in the past has advocated that Islam can accept liwat. Like Islam can accept gay relationships. So it's interesting that he shares the statement, this navigating differences, and he says, important statement by North American Muslim leaders. So he's promoting it. This guy, like, very interesting, right? And Yasser Qadi recently had Muhammad Fadl, like this complete Zindiq, featured him on his channel as like, oh, Islamic scholar Muhammad Fadl. So Yasser Qadi is promoting these Zanadiqa. And in turn, the Zanadiqa promote Yasser Qadi and Omar Sulaiman and their statements. It's a parasitic relationship. So, like, these are the things that you wouldn't necessarily know unless you're researching it and you've like, you know about who these people are. Like, I've known about Muhammad Fadl since 2006 or 2005, maybe even. He actually came like and was giving a lecture at MIT, I believe, when I was a undergrad. He's a professor at University of Toronto. So I've known about this guy for a long time, you know, read his different articles that he has. Like, he's a reformist, obviously, Zindiq. And I've debated him too, like long time ago, just through email. But yeah, he's just a reprehensible person, and I'm sure he feels the same way about me. But when you see such a person having a close relationship with Yasser Qadi and these other people, then that gives you a very specific message. You know, you can connect the dots more easily. There's another thing. So Jonathan Brown's tweets. Let me find that. Let me see if I can bring it up. Yeah, this is crazy. This is par for the course, basically. Here, hold on. Let me share this. Okay, this is an exchange that Jonathan Brown had with some militant guy, liberal. So this is the account tweeting it is Abdullah. I don't know this account. And he's just summarizing the conversation. Okay. We'll get back to the summary, but look at this screenshot. Can you see or no? Is that clear? Because I'm having trouble expanding it. I'll just read it to you. So this is someone who's quote tweeting Yasser Qadi. Yasser Qadi tweeting out the navigating differences nonsense. And then this guy, Nathan Lean, says, tweets publicly, quote unquote, peaceful coexistence cannot happen when your view of someone's identity is animated by a deep-seated belief that who they are as a human is fundamentally flawed. This statement does not sow trust or promote understanding. It shrouds self-righteousness in pretty language. So as bad as the statement is, they were constantly talking about, we acknowledge your constitutional rights. We want to live in harmony. We want to coexist peacefully. That's all we want. That's all we've ever wanted. And they're saying, no, we cannot live peacefully with you until you completely accept us for who we are. We cannot live and coexist peacefully. Okay, so this is what Nathan says. Then our good buddy Jonathan Brown chimes in. He says, so what would be required for peaceful coexistence? Nathan responds, accepting people for who they say they are, affirming that their view of their identity is the only view that really matters, promoting empathy and understanding, and repressing judgment, celebrating the diversity of the human experience. That's peaceful coexistence. So see, this is the problem, like with the statement, because it has no moral content. It is empty, vacuous, just labels. As Nathan correctly identifies, it's just pretty language. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just hollow. And he says, this is what peaceful coexistence means. It means understanding, no judgment, accept people that as they say that they are, accept the diversity, celebrate the diversity. And then Brown says, what happens if your religion does pass judgment on certain acts and does not endorse the idea that an individual's own view of their identity is the only view that is the only one that matters? Does the state get to require you to alter your beliefs or tell your children what they should believe? Like, Jonathan Brown is asking such a stupid question. Like, of course that's what they say. Of course they say that, yes, the state does require you to alter your beliefs because your beliefs are hateful. Your beliefs are pure hatred. So, of course, the state needs to curb these kinds of homophobic, transphobic, intolerant beliefs and make sure that they do not proliferate by, in the next generation. And that's why the state has to control the schools. The state has to impose these kinds of anti-discrimination policies. Of course, like that's such an obvious answer from the liberal side. But what world is Jonathan Brown living in? That's the question that I keep asking myself. Then the response, I don't believe that religions say anything. Religious people say plenty. Religions don't say anything. Religious people say plenty. So Islam has no content. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, it's just the religious people that are speaking. That said, if my religion passed judgment on certain people or suggested that their view of themselves was not paramount, I'd not be a part of that religion. Religion shouldn't get a pass for being hateful. Okay, so Islam is hateful, and if you're part of, you better apostate. Leave Islam. Leave Islam. If you truly want peaceful coexistence, you need to stop being Muslim. That's the only way. And if you don't do it, okay, well, the state is going to have to intervene. The state is going to have to come and force you to reform. So Jonathan Brown says, since we can't interrogate religions, we make do with what people believe. Do you acknowledge their legal right to believe what you deem hateful? Again, like, what world? Do you not know? Like, where have you been, Jonathan Brown? Like, Jonathan Brown, you yourself have been canceled for your beliefs. Like, when the woke crowd went after you because of, very bland statements you made about, like, I think slavery or something. Like, you were you were canceled, like, for your beliefs. Are you still, like, surprised about this issue? So Nathan responds, they can believe whatever they want, but when it's articulated in the public sphere, it becomes something else. So you can believe whatever you want, but it has to be private, in your head only. Never articulate it. Don't teach your children. You're articulating it. Don't teach your children in Islamic schools. Don't teach your children at home either. That's indoctrination. That's hate indoctrination. Don't articulate it in the public sphere, like on social media. We have to ban all of these videos as violating, these guidelines. Don't articulate, don't advocate it for, don't preach it, don't read your book, don't read the Quran. The Quran is hateful. Your whole religion is hateful, obviously. You don't have that right. You have only the right to think about your hateful views in the depths of your heart, in the depths of your mind, but never articulate it. You do not have the right to do that. This is why I don't buy hate the sin, love the sin, or hate the sin tomfoolery. Or in this context, let's coexist peacefully, even if I disagree with who you are as a person. Wow. So then Jonathan Brown continues his very polite questioning. This guy is like railing into him, disrespectful, but Jonathan Brown, mashallah, he has such good adab. You can't fault Jonathan Brown for any problems with adab. So then he says, do you accept people's legal right to engage in such speech and not be compelled to articulate some other belief? Jonathan Brown is he's flustered. He's like surprised. Like he's just incredulous. Like, are you really saying what I think you're saying? So what do you think he's going to say, John? What do you think he's saying? What he's going to answer his question with? Nathan says, they can believe whatever they want. Okay. He says, no. No, they don't have the legal right. When your speech, even if shrouded in the cloth of religious freedom, quote unquote religious freedom, targets people's identities and risks marginalizing them, or worse, I don't support your right to say it. So there, how much more explicit? This is not some like random person like Nathan, whatever. He's representing like this is what the liberal status quo is. Like this is what being woke means. Like no, you don't have the right. Your entire religion is hateful. Your religion is hateful. Your beliefs are hateful. No, you do not have the right to articulate your beliefs. No, you do not have the right to, have speech where you express your beliefs or you teach your children. No, absolutely not. That's not peaceful coexistence. If you want to peacefully coexist, leave your religion, abandon it, apostatize from Islam, then we can talk. Then we can talk about peaceful coexistence. And then what does good old Dr. Brown say? He says, thanks for discussing this with me. Thanks. That was nice. Thank you. So this is the gloss, or this is the summary from Abdullah. American Muslims say, we tolerate you. We just don't want anything to do with you. This is not correct. Like if this is supposed to be representing the navigating differences, no, the statement doesn't say we don't want anything to do with you. Jonathan Brown doesn't say that. Remember, Jonathan Brown says we have a shared vision with Qawm Lut and we support their constitutional rights. That's what the navigating differences says. Peaceful coexistence, harmonious coexistence doesn't mean we don't want anything to do with you. We don't want anything to do with you is something else. So don't get it twisted. But even that is not good enough for Qawm Lut. Qawm Lut says, we don't tolerate you. We want your children and your schools and your places of worship and your governments to adhere to our norms, our sexual habits, our values. Accept it or else. Accept it or else. And then American Muslims, thanks for discussing this with me. Oh. Guys, so painful. Oh man, this is unbelievable. Like I couldn't have asked for a better demonstration of exactly what's wrong with this statement. Couldn't have asked for a better example. So this is Jonathan Brown, director at Yaqeen Institute. Director. Let's go to Yaqeen Institute, actually. Not only is Jonathan Brown their director, no, a director. They have multiple directors. He is one of them. But check this out. Our commitment to scholarly rigor. Yaqeen Institute. Blah, blah, blah. Just a lot of pretty language that they violate constantly. Okay, so who is on their editorial review board? Okay, these are the people who are maintaining the scholarly rigor at Yaqeen Institute. Okay. Oh, number 3, the first guy on the list, Dr. Jonathan Brown. Wow. Maintaining scholarly rigor at Yaqeen Institute. Dr. Julio Rivera, former advisor to the U.S. military, specializing in counter-extremism, counter-terrorism, advising the U.S. government. So this is their are these scholars? Like, how are you maintaining you're committed to scholarly rigor, but your editorial board is full of non-scholars? Unless you're telling me these guys are scholars. Okay, some of them, yeah, maybe some of them have the credentials to be called a scholarly editor or reviewer. Maybe 2. The rest of them on this review board, like, Yaqeen is constantly like undermining itself and making itself a laughing stock. Like, you don't even need me to, point this stuff out. Like, but no one cares. Like, no one cares about Yaqeen Institute. Frankly, that's my understanding. So any other final points? We're at 3.5 hours, so I think that's good enough. Yeah, people are saying that Yasser Qadi told him, like in their inner circles, Yasser Qadi told them that this was the most difficult statement they've ever had to write. This was the most difficult. Oh, so difficult to say that gay sex is haram. Oh, so such a challenge. So many sleepless nights to say that there were two genders. Oh, I live in Dallas. Should I go to Qawm Institute when I grow up? Yeah, if you want to mix with a lot of ladies, that's your goal, to go mix and have fun field trips and fun sessions, activities together with the sisters. Yeah, go ahead. Qawm Mixtitude is great for that. Anything else? Yeah, I'm sorry I missed a lot of your comments, but I just had to focus on making sure what I said was correct on the document because it's important to get it right. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any other relevant questions. Oh, I can't answer some of these questions on stream. Oh, here's a good question. Daniel, can you grade the subscription price for Alesna for someone who lives in the third world specifically? Inshallah. I'm trying to figure out technologically how to do that because that's a technical challenge, but that's what I want to do. I want to make it more affordable depending on where you live, because I know what is like considered a good price in the US might be just exorbitant in other countries. So trying to figure that out. Jazakallah khair, brother Sean, for your very kind words. Appreciate you, bro. What is your next project? Good question. This Friday, we have Liberal Mind Control, a new course at Alesna Institute, but we're going to stream the first session free for everyone so you can get a sense for what our courses are like. And it's an exciting course on how liberalism controls people's thoughts and conditions and indoctrinates society, including Muslims. And there's this kind of idea that, well, we live in a free democracy. There are liberal states that are free. They allow free speech, free elections, free education. And then you have authoritarian states like Muslim countries that restrict free speech, restrict free education, restrict free elections. Um, so that's we're gonna debunk that basically throughout the course. It's gonna be very interesting, inshallah. Zamzam, may Allah support us in this difficult times. and increase us in beneficial knowledge and manners. Ameen. Genius of Islam, episode 4. We're working on it still. Taking a lot of time. It's my fault. It's all my fault. Any debates coming up? Yeah, there's a debate on June 23rd and 24th. It's like a back-to-back debate with a Muslim liberal. Actually, he's not Muslim. He considers himself Muslim, but he's not actually a Muslim. That's going to be at the end of June, inshallah. Did you ever ask YQ to come to your channel to discuss all of this? Yeah, I did. Oh, gotcha. I did ask him. I did, and he didn't come. So go troll his comment section. Can people join the team for a technical side? Yeah, inshallah. And stay tuned, like, for calls. Daniel, I actually sent you the translation for Genius of Islam, part 2 and 3 in Indonesian. Okay, let me check that. But make sure you send it in the correct format, because if you don't send it with the timestamps, I can't use it. So you have to give a SRT file with the timestamps. Otherwise, I can't use it. Can you explain the proper response to there were no barriers in the Prophet's masjid, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so we don't need that too? Yeah, I've explained this on multiple occasions, but basically in the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, women who came to the masjid, not all of the sahabiyat came to the masjid, only a few of them would go, and they would go for prayers when it was dark. So like Isha and Fajr. And so there's no sunlight, there's no electric light, so it's dark. They would wear black, they would cover themselves completely from head to toe, no face showing, and they would be in the back of the masjid, very far from the men's section. You could not see them because it would be pitch black in the masjid. There's no sunlight, there's no electricity, so there's no visible women. They were there. They had a separate entrance, but they were there, but they were completely out of sight. So that is not our situation. Now we have electricity. We have women who come to the masjid inappropriately dressed, not covering properly, sometimes even deliberately beautifying themselves and coming to the masjid. So it's a completely different situation. So the people who just have this, idiotic response that, oh, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't have any barrier in his masjid, like, this is so ignorant of Islam. This is so ignorant of the way that fiqh works, the way that the Sharia works. You are misapplying the Sunnah. You are misapplying the Sunnah because you are not applying it correctly. So that's the answer. It's not that complicated. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, brother. What advice would you give to Muslim parents living in Europe regarding educating their children where homeschooling is illegal? Move. That's why I recommend, like, don't, like, Europe is the worst place. That's my recommendation, because you basically can't guarantee. I mean, no one can guarantee that their children will grow up to be Muslim, but so many of the odds are stacked against you. Like, you can't control your own child's education. Like, and they're trying to secularize children in their educational system. All right, so appreciate everyone paying attention, and I hope you benefited from this stream. Make sure to like and subscribe the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and inshallah we will have. I'll try to put a summarized version of the reaction to navigating differences on Muslim Skeptic. So if people want to read something instead of watching a 3-hour plus video, they can do that and get the whole picture, inshallah. So be on the lookout for that. Again, go subscribe to our newsletter on muslimskeptic.com. That's very important. So I appreciate everyone's super chats and your comments, and I hope you had fun, because that's ultimately, what, if we're going to get into such a serious topic, and we have to sometimes laugh, right? Otherwise we'll cry. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I will catch you on the next stream, inshallah. Until next time, see you later. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.